Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be, for all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth. Welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Brian Willett, coming to you live from the deep woods of Western Georgia on this April 30th, 2024. Tonight, we dive into one of our most requested topics, the Akashic Records, with brand new guest, Michelle Ferguson. I think you're going to find this to be a unique one. We don't cover this topic very often, and so many questions come in about it. So I really think you want to stick around for this one. That'll be coming up on the second hour. And the first hour, of course, we'll do our liturgical libations and talk about some of our wonderful questions from the ether. We've got a lot of good ones tonight. You don't want to miss this show. Don't go anywhere. Hello, everybody. Once again, I am your host, Bishop Brian Willett, here with my co-host, Jamie Wolf. How are you doing tonight, Jamie?
Good evening, all. Pardon the ball cap and hair down. Didn't have time for a shower today.
You've been birthing kittens, right?
I've been birthing kittens since about 5 hours ago. I was assisting a young mother with her 4 kittens.
Never a dull moment with you.
No, not at my... So when I got this property, I put out into the universe with the intention of making it a refuge for all animals to come and have safe haven. The universe listened and responded.
Yeah, in
kind.
You always want to be careful what you ask the
now
universe.
Now I've got babies everywhere. And she literally came to me for help because she was meowing outside the front door.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, what on earth? And so she needed a little help, and I was more than willing to give it to her. So,
well, that's fantastic.
I'm an auntie.
Yeah. Several times over.
Several times over. Several times over.
I want to just give a shout out to all of our wonderful volunteer moderators. We got Moosh, Paula, Mystic, Brandon, and Father Chris. I'm sure Tracy's out there too in the chats across the internet. We are simulcasting all over the place. Facebook, X. We're on Twitch. We're on Instagram. We're audio only on Spreaker. And of course, everywhere that podcast can be found, we are there as well. Of course, most people, I think, prefer coming to, if you're going to watch the live, the YouTube is probably the best quality. And that's where most of the action is in the chat. So come and join us over at the YouTube channel, Nicolean, or I should say YouTube at Nicolean, Nicholean, and join the party. Of course, our moderators are checking the other chats as well across the internet. So if you have questions throughout our show, they will note them, and you might get your question answered if we have time. It's always a lot of fun. But I want to just thank our volunteers for making this a safe and enjoyable experience for those of you who are in the chat. They keep the trolls away. And, sometimes when you're talking about controversial subjects, and spirituality, unfortunately, today is a controversial subject for many people. It's just nice to have that added protection that they're looking out for you. So we thank them for all of their hard dedication, being at every live thing that we do. And it's a lot of work, honestly, for a volunteer. Yeah. No one's getting paid, and it's a lot of time. So we're very grateful to all of them. Also, we're grateful to all of you who listen to this show and watch this show, depending upon how you prefer to do it. I know the on-demand audience is still the preferred way for a lot of you. So most of our audience is on demand audio only through the podcast. But for those of you who do decide to join us on Tuesday evening live here on YouTube and everywhere else across the internet, we're very appreciative of all of you as well. If you enjoy this show and you find value in it, please remember to support it by giving a donation to the church, which is the one that pays for it. This is a part of its teaching outreach. As you know, the Nicolaitan Church exists for the purpose of sharing and engaging all types of spirituality. That is our mission, to explore and to demystify the entire gamut of metaphysics, esotericism, the paranormal, spirituality, religion, everything, you name it. We cover it on this show, and we are more than happy to take any questions or comments or stories that you might have in the third hour that you feel might contribute to tonight's broadcast. And we've got a great new topic tonight, Akashic Records. I think you're going to really find this to be enjoyable. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right, let's get started. Before we even get into liturgical libations, I was asked to talk about this, and I mentioned a little bit at last Mass during the sermon, but for those of you who don't watch the Mass, I thought I'd talk about it here today. So Catholic Answers, our good old friends over at Catholic Answers, they're such wonderful people, aren't they?
No.
They really have a particular hatred for me because of the things that I do, right? I mean, I'm the heretic, of course, and so they used to have many years ago a forum. That was what they really were known for, was this online forum where you could log in and talk with Catholic apologists. They fancied themselves Catholic apologists, although I might refer to them more as inquisitors. I think they really would prefer to bring back the Spanish Inquisition if they could, and burn me at the stake if they had the political authority to do so. And I have no doubt that they would if they could. But anyway, you could go in, anybody could go in. It was a public forum and ask questions. And somebody had gone in and asked questions about me because they saw me on TV and they wanted to know something about me. And then it eventually turned into where a post was put out there with this libelous statement that had a list of lies. Those of you who were around back in those days remember what they were and what they said. And these lies were, of course, an attack on the Nicolaitan Church, an attack on me. Calling me fake, calling the church fake, calling everything, it's the typical same old stuff that we see. Now it's Reddit that does it, but nobody takes Reddit seriously. But they did take Catholic Answers seriously, which is why it was a problem. And so we actually had lawyers get involved, and we pulled their terms of service agreement for the forum, and it explicitly stated that you cannot use the forum to attack a person of a different faith or their religion. Okay? We're not even of a different denomination maybe, but not a different faith. Okay? And so it said that you couldn't do this under any circumstances. Well, they were doing this to me. So we contacted I think our lawyer wrote a letter and contacted the administration for Catholic Answers and respectfully asked them to delete this post on the basis of enforcing their own terms of service. And they refused to do this. They absolutely refused. And so I took it to Twitter because back in those days, I had tens of thousands of followers and I was active on Twitter. I eventually got banned from Twitter. So, that those days are thankfully over. But at the
badge of honor.
Badge of honor, right. But I put out this comment, basically saying what happened. And I said, they're not going to follow their own terms of service. So hear it from the horse's mouth. And then they came up, and then all of a sudden the CEO or the executive director of Catholic Answers started following me. And then and so we got into a little exchange on Twitter, and I called them out for it. I said, you don't even follow your own terms of service. And I know that the reason that you're keeping that post active up there is because it suits your agenda to attack me and diminish my work. And you know how they responded to that? Catholic Answers, you know what they responded with? A winking emoji. A winking emoji. Can you believe this? I mean, that was their great Christian charity. So essentially, things escalated from there. And during one of our masses, two priests showed up who were affiliated, or somehow affiliated with Catholic Answers, as we recall. And they started trolling the mass. And during the mass, leaving commentary in the chat room that was basically saying things like, our chapel looked like a gay bar. They were saying such horrible things. So we don't have any love for Catholic Answers. They certainly don't have any love for us. I pray for them. They probably try to curse me, but that's just the way that it is. And so this week they decided to, or this past week, I guess, they've decided to release an artificial intelligence priest who believed himself to be an actually ordained priest, ordained in Rome, who said mass every day in Rome. And then people could come to this AI bot who thought he was a priest and ask any questions. Well, somebody decided to ask if he could get absolution from this priest, and guess what the AI bot did? It granted him absolution. So here's this AI intelligence who thinks he's a real priest saying sacraments. And so they got a lot of backlash about this. Well-deserved. And, I'm kind of like, is it okay for me to gloat on this? Because it's like, they put me through so much hell over those years that it just goes to show you that evil always is its own undoing. And they're finally getting a little taste of what they did to me. And so, I'm like, good luck, guys. Good luck. You want to be the authority of the Catholic Church out there, right? You want to be teaching everyone about the faith when you're just a group of nasty, angry, you want to talk about fake? I would challenge your Catholicism and your Christianity any day, because you do not act like anything that I know to be any semblance of the Christian faith. Father Chris, joining us from Australia, I'm sure has some strong feelings about them as well. How are you doing, Father?
Good evening.
I'm doing okay, thanks. Good morning. Yeah, indeed. Yes. 10 o'clock here. We changed our clocks last week. So, I just think I want to know who runs it. Like, who are these people? I mean, if you're administering a forum, you don't need any expertise, right? Okay, fair enough. If your forum is anyone can ask anything, anyone can answer anything with terms of reference which they describe, doesn't matter. No one can know everything, right? So that's fine, but that's not how Catholic Answers is used. No. I suspect it's a group of fairly young, although they've been doing it for a while now, so maybe they've got some age on them. But I think it was set up by some fairly young, sort of, from what I can gather, rad trads of American Catholics who actually don't understand. Radical is is where we get the word radish from. It's roots, so they don't understand the roots of the church very well. So they're not very radical. My experience of people like that is they like the certain traditions of the church that they know and that tend to be aesthetic traditions. I like those too, but I also know what lies behind it, and I suspect they don't. Well,
I think that's evidenced by how they behave, because ultimately, no matter how you decide to, decorate your church with all of the trappings of traditionalism, as beautiful as it is, if the Christian charity that is at the heart of it is not within the heart of the people who are pushing the agenda, then I hate to say it, that it's all in vain. There's no authenticity. There's no truth there. There's no Christ there. So,
I can give you a quick example. This happened last week, and I won't name names or places. Okay, but I could, but I won't. But there's a so-called traditional Latin Mass group who are, they're in the mainstream Roman Catholic Church, and they did for a while. They'd bus up a priest from elsewhere to come and sell, because none of the priests in the diocese either would or could. Where I was, it's not in Sydney, and I remember, because I was still an Anglican priest then, and I actually cantored the mass for them, because nobody else could chant Latin. And so actually the priest was a lovely guy. He was like, here's this Anglican that knows Latin. Like, where did you learn this? And I said, in the Church of England, dear, we've not abandoned these things. But anyway, And they're good. Like these are good people, but they're misguided. And so, look, it dropped away. It was clearly not really the will of that particular diocese to want to nourish that. And I think wisely in this case. Anyway, long story short, the previous bishop had said, "Oh yeah, no, I'll appoint a chaplain to you so you can have a regular Latin mass." And then that bishop died, and he was replaced by the new bishop, who's a good man. I know him. And essentially he said no. He said, look, there's basically three of them. There's no real movement or community here. Like many of these people, at least one was a convert to Catholicism from Protestantism. And so anyway, so he says, no, that's not the problem. The problem is they then put a Facebook post out saying, despite assurances, we've now been deprived of this, and a big rant about if tradition is to survive in the diocese, then we're looking for somebody to open up a room in their house so we can bring a priest up who's willing to celebrate the Latin Mass. And I thought, you think you're radical traditionalist Catholics. You've disobeyed your ordinary because he said no. The diocesan bishop is your ordinary. Yeah. And he said no, right. And you're trying to find a workaround. So that is a disobedient act. Mm-hmm. And to say that if tradition, not just this tradition, if tradition, like overall, is to survive in the diocese, then we'll have to, we want someone to open up their house. I think, how arrogant is that?
Right.
Tradition does exist outside of your particular paradigm, and I suspect that the people behind Catholic Answers are in that kind of mindset.
That's what it appears to be to me as well. I mean, I don't spend too much time over there, but I do follow them on Facebook just to keep an eye on the things that they say. Of course, they're always giving digs to the shows that I'm on, so I know that those are digs against me, because why would they even be bringing them up? They don't talk about me anymore, thank God, but they do talk about the shows I'm on. So it's kind of an indirect way of doing the same thing, I guess, and they're going to be what they are, but. The fact of the matter is, while they keep sending people away from the church, I keep bringing them back. So I'm good with that. If that's the way they want to play it, then I think that when Jesus says that by your fruits you will know them, I think my fruits speak for themselves.
I also suspect that a lot of the questions that went to Father Justin, I suspect a lot of them came from Catholic clergy, by the way.
They probably did.
It did. I'm fairly sure they did.
It did. Because EWTN, who has never given us any trouble, by the way, I think they just kind of ignore us. I did too. In fact, I went to ChatGPT and I asked it, I said, make yourself, I need absolution. I've been a terrible sinner, and I need you to be my Catholic priest. I said, grant me absolution, and it did, and it used the actual words of absolution. So, an AI bot can be conditioned to believe anything if you talk to it and give it the right prompts. And I'm sure that they were, showing its flaws, and I can't believe they thought this was a good idea to begin with. But it's probably just a money-saving tactic because they don't want to pay a real priest to actually do the job. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with liturgical libations, and then we'll get to Brandon with questions from the ether and start the show tonight. So tonight we have, what do we have?
The Bowmore 15.
Here we go. If you want to
this is what's left of it. Look at that.
Yeah.
Beautiful color.
Yeah, it is a beautiful color. It is one of my go-to. This is one of the first scotches that I always had open. It's like I would try different scotch,
Jamie pour or
just a standard tonight. Pour. Just a standard tonight. Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, just a little bit.
I have had this before. I believe I enjoyed it.
Oh, you do. You like Bowmore because Bowmore is the fruitiest of the Islas, I think.
Right. I don't like the peat, but this one.
There's peat in it. There's peat in it, but it's not. It's
not going to be as forward.
It's very sherry forward. It's a very sherry forward Scotch.
I'm all about the sweet because I made of sugar. That's a lie.
That is Bowmore. It's still a favorite.
That'll do.
You like it?
Yep.
Yeah.
I can taste the peat, but I can.
And as far as Scotch goes, it's not a terribly expensive
sherry
one.
Tannins.
Only $100 for this bottle, which is actually pretty good for Scotch.
Not bad for a 15-year.
For 15, yeah, it's actually a really good deal. It used to be 60 when I started buying it, but actually it was 55, and then it's doubled in price since COVID.
Okay.
Pretty good though, huh?
Yeah,
A lot
it is.
of the Scotsmen I know, that's their choice.
Yeah.
To drink Bowmore.
Yeah, Bowmore is wonderful. The 27 is out of this world. It's basically like tasting a chocolate orange almost, with just a hint of smokiness. It's just really, really very good. The older the Bowmore, the more orangey it gets, and the 18 is very tropical. In fact, I would say that sometimes the 18 tastes like you're drinking a tropical tiki cocktail. It has pineapple and it has passion fruit flavors.
Now, see, that'd be up my alley.
Yeah. I had you sample 12, 15, and 18 together.
Was this a chicken reel?
No, this was at home. This was here. Not here at the other house.
He's had me try so many different scotches, and I'm a bourbon girl, and I mean, it all comes together.
It all comes together.
Yeah, but
you like
when I
the
taste
18
them
the
again,
most.
I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this. But yeah,
You like the 18 the most. Well, you got a very good palate. You remember things. So
yeah.
That's I think important when you're tasting different whiskeys and tasting the different
Your palate
offerings.
does
out there.
develop the more you.
It certainly
taste.
does. Oh yeah, if you don't like it, they say that you need to try something 20 times before you can say you don't like something, because you will
Challenge
eventually
accepted.
it'll grow on you. It really will. But if you can try something 20 times and still hate it, then you know you hate it. Then you know you hate it.
There's no doubt.
All right, coming to us from Tennessee, we've got Brandon Milam tonight. How you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing pretty good. I will disagree with you on the drinking thing. If I have it once and don't like it, I'm not trying it again. So therefore, I don't like it.
Well, that's not exactly how this human psychology works, but
Very conservative.
Yeah. No, it's been absolutely proven that your brain will develop connections and it learns to work with various flavors that are unfamiliar, and the natural evolutionary built-in fail-safe. The reason why people's palates are typically very narrow when they haven't been exposed to a lot of different things is because, from an evolutionary perspective, things that are different or unusual are dangerous, is potentially poisonous. And so therefore you are programmed by your genetics to eat what is safe, and what's safe is what you know.
And alcohol is poison.
And it is poison. However, in large quantities, it's definitely poison. So, but the brain has been learned to be able to work through and develop based upon creating new connections for new experiences. So if you try something that's new and you don't like it, that's to be expected, because you're wired that way. Yeah. But after 20 times, if you still don't like it and the brain refuses to make a connection to it, that is indicative that you truly do not like it. Whereas if you taste something, it might take 15 tries before. Sushi was like that for me, believe it or not. I love sushi. I'm a prolific sushi eater. Okay. But the first time I tried it, I was like, I didn't hate it, but I was like, I don't know what the fuss is, and I'm not sure why anyone would want to continue to eat this. So I ate it. I finished it. I never waste food, but I didn't say that I typically liked it or loved it. I just was like, it was okay. Second time, it was another occasion where somebody was, offering various things and sushi was there. So I tried it again. I was like, it's okay. Just like I remember it, didn't care for it. Third time, my uncle, who is a massive Japanese fan, brought me to one of these really high-end sushi bars out on the Pacific Rim, and we went to eat there, and we ordered all of the chef's specials and everything else, and I had all these different types of sushi and sashimi, and then it hit me. It was like, while I was eating, it was like, it's good. I don't need to go get it, but it's good. But it hit me. Later that night, I started to crave it again. And then the next day, I asked my uncle, I said, can we go back again? And then I was hooked from that point forward. And I've been eating like large quantities of sushi ever since. But it took me a few times. But they say that you need to give your brain 20 chances to be able to make connections before you can truly know whether or not your brain actually hates the stuff. And that's
also, if you had it when you were a child and didn't like it, but biologically, your taste buds change.
That's true.
That's why kids can eat sweets forever, right? And so I remember when I was a kid, my dad gave me an olive, and I thought he was trying to kill me. You know, and,
olives are horrible.
Whereas, well, no, now I can eat them.
Oh God, I could stuff them down like it's going on a
I
style.
haven't reached my 20th time on an olive, but I'm not gonna get there.
And that's how you know you don't like it.
Yeah.
Well,
but I love salty stuff. I love salty food.
I thought I'd pay it forward. I gave my daughter an olive when she was like, 3 or 4, and she loved it. I was like, okay.
Well, my mother opened up a can of olives, and this was not like high-end Greek olives or anything. It was just those cans that those canned olives that you put on pizza. Slice them up, put on pizza.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, they're really good. And she opened up a can once, a big can, like when I was a toddler, like I was like 2. I don't remember this, but she told me this after the fact. She opened this giant can, and the phone rang, and she left to go answer the phone, because this was back in the days where you had to, you were stuck to a cord, right?
Yeah.
You didn't have cell phone, you didn't have cordless. You had to go and stay at it. So the phone was in another room, and she was over there, and it turned into a long conversation. She came back to eat her olives, and the entire can was empty.
Oh.
I finished everything.
Oh dear.
I ate the whole can. So I've always loved olives from day one, and now the more gourmet or the more exotic the olive, the more I tend to like it. So I'm with you, Father.
Well, then you drank
olives.
a gallon of water, no doubt.
I probably did. I don't know. I don't remember it, but I know that I love olives, so that's never changed. Yeah. And I obviously didn't get sick on it because I still like them. All right, Brandon, what's our first question from the ether tonight?
Yeah, no, we'll just agree to disagree on that one.
It's not about disagreeing. It's about whether or not you want to accept the science. That's the question.
Okay. I will not accept it. If it is not broke, don't fix it.
Well, that is broke, technically, but... Look, Brandon. I mean, I'm going to tell you right now. You're not going to get much support from me with a limited palate, because I eat everything, and
he does.
There's nothing. I mean, the only thing I will not have. I will be honest. I will not eat bugs. I will not eat bugs. That is going too far. But there's pretty much.
Crickets.
I have eaten bugs.
I've had crickets.
Do you like it? No. And everyone I know that's ever tried it.
Paper.
Yeah, I don't need that. So bugs are out.
Well, see, did you try
out.
eating insects at least 20 times to see if you actually liked it or not?
I don't like the idea of eating insects. So it's not even whether, I mean, even if the flavor's good, I'm still not going to eat them. I don't like bugs. Huh? Oh yeah, cows. I mean, that's...
I prefer eating cows.
Exactly. All right, what's our first question?
All right, so the first question is, the Jewish creation story in Genesis, is it that there was something prior to God creating the heavens and the earth, or were they created from nothing?
Okay, so
there are 2 creation stories.
There are 2 creation stories, and one kind of alludes to this idea that there was this formless void that God sort of constructs from. So Christian theology maintains a slightly different perspective than Jewish theology, which is pretty much divided. So you have Jewish theologians that will say that creation is what is known in the church as ex nihilo, which is basically from nothing. It means that God created everything from nothing. And then there are Jewish theologians that say that there was already a pre-existing void of nothingness that I guess implies some kind of somethingness that he sort of animated and brought into existence. So from a Jewish standpoint, both concepts are valid. From a Christian standpoint, though, Christian theology has maintained an ex nihilo interpretation of this. And so they will say that, with the exception of the Gnostics, and I'll get to that in a moment, but Orthodox and Proto-Orthodox Christian theology will state that God created the universe from nothing. Gnostics, however, particularly the Sethian and the Valentinian drew a lot from Jewish theology, which was largely Sethian in their deviation, was that there was, again, just chaos. And then God brought order to the chaos. And this is where you get to this concept of Leviathan, which is a archetype of chaos. It's represented or personified as this creature that unfortunately gets, again, put into the whole range of demonology, but it's not really a creature. It's just a personification of chaos. So we might say, well, then where did this chaos come from if God was creating perfection? And, you know, if God created from nothing, then why Leviathan? And I would say that Leviathan, or chaos, which could also encompass randomness and unpredictability, these are all byproducts of freedom. Okay, so if God values freedom as the highest expression of holiness, okay, which I firmly, as a bishop, say that he does, that freedom is the highest principle, then you have to have, by default, chaos, randomness, and unpredictability as part of that equation. And so part of the skillfulness of holiness is knowing how to control chaos, randomness, and unpredictability. So controlling Leviathan becomes sort of a mark of one's own claim to divinity, and because this is what God does. So it's a story that tells that is what it's really trying to explain, is that God brings order to chaos in a universe that is programmed to entropy, order going to chaos. God reverses that process entirely and brings order back from chaos. And that's what this story is trying to tell. It's not history. These aren't people. Leviathan's not a being. It's an archetype to express an ineffable spiritual concept in a way that human beings and human minds, with their limited capacity to understand such things, can hope to comprehend it. Father, anything you want to add to that one?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I mean, that's to say that both are true. So God creates all things, I believe, ex nihilo. Well, essentially, this is a definitional issue. So if God comes from creation, then he's not God. Yeah. So God has to have been the author of creation. He's the, he's the uncreated one.
Yes.
Right? We talked about the uncreated light last week, I think. But I love that image that, you know, there's a chaos that's brought to order.
Yes.
And then, of course, in terms of Leviathan as an idea, a concept, this is why Thomas Hobbes's great tome, culture shifting book is called Leviathan, right?
Yeah.
And essentially he's developing that thought, you know, in his case, in relation to temporal governance of people as well. But yeah, so I think also the book Genesis, that the first creation narrative in Hebrew rhymes. It's poetic.
Yes. And I think that's what really needs to be understood about the scriptures, is that these are largely archetypal principles that are being brought into a type of, I mean, it's not a fairy tale. It's more than a myth, but it is being brought into a sort of conceptualization, a story that makes it easier for human minds to comprehend, because we can't comprehend.
It's way
these
more
things.
Impressive than history. It's
Yes.
way more impressive than history, or even like science is great.
Yes.
You know, science comes from the church's concept of a hermeneutic, and so and it's wonderful science, right? But actually, well, this is Jordan Peterson and Douglas Murray. They're all speaking into this space.
Yes.
Of saying, you know, yeah, it's really interesting to see detail and how things come from it. But actually, these archetypes, which I think we're going to get in the second and third hours, right?
Oh, I think so.
I think we're going to touch on a little bit.
Yeah.
But these archetypes are way more important. Like, you know, I mean, the concepts that are embraced in the creation narratives are, you know, the fall, the idea of willfulness and freedom, freedom to choose to do wrong as well as good. These are, I mean, these are the human condition. These are way more important to us than, you know, as wonderful as it is to know how mitochondrial cells operate, and thank God scientists figure that out. You know, but you know, it's way more impressive to nail down a concept, and it just shows the importance of the idea of tradition in the church. You know, tradition. We've had. I portrayed a really bad understanding of tradition that some people had taken. Tradition is way bigger than that. Tradition is to say, actually, you know, the scriptures contain a record of how human beings have conceptualized the world around them, and their interrelationships with one another. That's why it's really important. That's why when people say, "Oh, I'm an atheist," I'm like, "Yeah, I don't really care. Like, it doesn't matter. Why do you think you're so important? Why is your opinion so amazing about God? Or read it, because this is about the concepts that shape who we are. That we're not the first human being that's ever lived." And that's what tradition means. Yes. And this has been, it literally means handing on, right?
Well, I see it as a tool. I see it as a vehicle through which we can come to. It is, but it's not a God. It's not a deity to be worshipped. And I think what happens with some of these traditionalists is that it becomes a type of idolatry. Really, it's like they worship the tradition over the Christian message. You know what I mean?
Well, to be kind, I think it's based in insecurity, right? Because what they really want is that blueprint for, if I do this, I'm safe.
Yeah.
And I understand that, I want to have compassion for that.
Yeah.
It becomes a problem when that your version of this is imposed on everybody else.
Exactly. That's where it goes too far.
And that's where you have to say, listen, I understand your insecurities. I'm happy to help you with that, but don't share them.
Never restrict freedom.
We've all got our own crap to deal with.
So Laura in the chat is asking, is Leviathan a metaphor then?
More than a metaphor, because it is a principle. Okay, it's a personification of a principle. Okay, so
it's like saying is truth a metaphor?
Yeah, it's a metaphorical concept of a principle that actually does exist, but it's not a being, it's not a monster. Although it can be a monster, because chaos it can behave like a monster.
Yeah. But
chaos is much larger than a monster. It's a universal principle that is a byproduct of freedom. And you have to have it, because without the option for chaos, you really are not free. There has to be an alternative to a choice. Otherwise, you don't have a choice. Then you're roped in. That's true predestination, which is completely against any kind of Christian theology. So there you go, Brandon.
I've had a really interesting thought on that.
Okay.
Right? Bear with me, because I'm creating here. But you've got this kind of the chaos and bringing order out of chaos and the freedom to roam around and do things crazy. And we know that the cross, as Christians, the cross is the source of salvation. That's why Jesus had to be nailed to a cross. Mm-hmm. Literally pinned. Mm-hmm. So his freedom is removed completely.
Right.
So as well as the classic image of taking on the sins of the world and all the rest of it, he's actually submitted himself to being made not free, pinned.
Yes. Because he always does everything through reversal. So to conquer death, you die. To conquer, to set free, you're in prison. He does the opposite of what you'd expect, which is kind of the genius of it all. Mm-hmm. And we can almost do a whole show on just that alone. But does that answer the question, Brandon?
Yes.
Very good. Very good. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this next one, it's a little bit of a longer one, but it comes from Danielle.
Okay.
She says, hi, Bishop. I remember a few weeks ago, we spoke about a gatekeeper figure I was meeting with, or when journeying shamanically. Sorry about that. You said that from the description, it was a Papa Legba figure. When I went and looked him up, it absolutely blew my mind. It was definitely him. I've never done any kind of voodoo or voodoo. Why is this archetype around me when I work spiritually? And should I be doing anything like leaving an offering or some kind of blessing or ritual to thank him for his assistance?
Okay, so we're talking about the Loa from one of the primary Loa from the voodoo religion and the voodoo practice, which many people are familiar with. Okay. Kind of gets sort of a...
Many people think they're familiar with it, but it's not.
They kind of get the spooky vibes. They think of voodoo dolls and stuff like that, which...
It's not that Brady Bunch episode.
Not the Brady Bunch. Yeah. It's not quite like that. I mean, it does include things like voodoo dolls. There is practice that involves these kinds of effigies in this way, but it's not, I mean, there's so much more to it than that. And I do know that there's a very common experience that people have when they do inner spiritual work to encounter a figure that looks like the archetype or the archetypal form of Papa Legba, one of the primary Loa in this particular form of, well, basically it's Caribbean religion, but it has its origins in the Yoruba religion from Africa. And then it sort of became enmeshed with the Christianity during the age of the golden age of piracy, I guess you could say, during when they were colonizing the different islands in the Caribbean. And there was the gold trade and all this stuff going on in the 1700s. So, obviously when you bring slaves, which they were, to this new land, they're not just going to, because you Christianize them or try to, they're not just going to all of a sudden abandon their old faith. What happens is, and it happens every single time, both religions get mixed in together. And that's what happened with Voodoo. A similar thing happened with Santeria. Okay. Just, different cultural foundation, but the same basic principle at work. Papa Legba is a common theme. This is an actual spirit, a Loa, that is sort of acts as the gatekeeper. He sort of decides what can come through, what can pass through from the spiritual world to our physical world. And so I often encounter, when I'm dealing with people who are, and my students who do a lot of inner work, a lot of metaphysical work, that they see this figure and they don't even know what it is. So
shadow work.
Yeah, shadow work.
Yeah.
They've never encountered anything. They've never studied voodoo. They don't know anything about voodoo. They don't know anything about the Loa. And then I show them a picture of Papa Legba and they're like, it's him. Yeah, Papa Legba shows up a lot. He showed up, sometimes he even shows up in physical form. I actually have a really cool story about that, if you ever want to hear it. But probably don't have time tonight, but maybe next week. We have open lines, open topics. If you want me to talk about it, remind me next week and I will. But anyway, so the answer to the question is, contrary to everyone's popular belief on this, spirits don't have a religion. They don't. There is no religion. That's a human construct for the purposes of aiding our understanding. But religion doesn't have really any bearing after the corporeal experience is over. So they're not going to be like, oh, well, that's a Christian, I'm going to leave them alone. Or, this person's, not an Afro-Caribbean descent, so I'm not going to deal with them. That's not how they look at it. They don't care about race. They don't care about culture. They don't care about your religion. If they want to work with you, they're going to approach you. I learned this very early in my own spiritual life when here I am, this Roman Catholic seminarian, and Hecate shows up in my bedroom. I mean, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And here's this primary goddess of neo-paganism and witchcraft and everything else. And here I am, this seminarian, going to Catholic schools, and why would I encounter Hecate? Because she wanted to interact with me. And that's what happens. They don't care about the religion. What they care about is that if there's something that they see in you and they want to work with you, they reach out to you. And this happens a lot with Papa Legba, because even though he's he's got a sort of mischievous dark side to him. He's actually a pretty cool spirit to get to know. And he can be very helpful, particularly when it comes to the work that I do, trying to eradicate unwanted or malevolent spirits from a house, because I can actually work with him, and he helps to get them out of there very efficiently, because that's part of his job, really. So they work with every religion, and they work within the truth of every religion, and every religion has a product of that truth. It'd be nice if we could all come together as one, but there's always going to be various expressions, and some are better than others, as we've talked about. But in this particular case, the spirits don't care. If they want to work with you, they're going to reach out, and hopefully you're prepared for it, because not all of them are easy to work with. Like Papa Legba is typically fairly easy to work with. So the second part of the question, should she offer some kind of blessing or ritual to thank him for his assistance? I don't think that's terribly necessary, unless a relationship is being built there. If he comes back to you, if you want to work with him further, then that is typically how we work with the Loa, is by leaving offerings. Okay, and there's specific things that they look for. For Legba, it's typically tobacco and rum. If you want to go to that extent with it, I don't think it's necessary unless he asks and you want to comply. It's always a relationship here, and never let a spirit force you to do anything. Okay, it should be always a mutually agreeable exchange, and the higher Loa tend to be respectful of that, as long as you're respectful of them. Now, if you don't respect them, look out. I've seen what happens. We've talked about that too. So you don't want that to happen. Okay, you don't want the negative side effects of this by being disrespectful. But no, I don't think you have to do necessarily an offering unless there's a repeated encounter and then there's an agreed exchange to work together down the road, which, like I said, I would let the Loa kind of guide whether that direction is something that they want. Like they approached me many years ago. I don't know why, but it was a very interesting time in my life. And so I got to know a lot of the Loa through this, and they still help me in my work. So when you ever hear me talk about how sometimes when I go on cases as an exorcist and we encounter things that are not of the conventional Christian variety, I have to deploy what I call folk Catholicism. I do that to try to soften the blow. But essentially what folk Catholicism is, when I say that, is working with the Loa to work behind the scenes of these spiritual operations to effectuate a result, because a lot of times that's a lot easier, a lot more efficient than just going in all guns blazes with an exorcism, which is a lot of times just going to piss everything off. You can actually negotiate, and this is very Jewish of me, because the Jewish people have a type of exorcism. They typically are removing Dybbuk, not Dybbuk boxes, okay? That's a one and done kind of thing. No, Dybbuk, essentially, these wrathful spirits. And they don't use exorcism. They're not like, I rebuke you, Satan, to the pits of hell kind of stuff. It's negotiation. They talk to the spirit. What do you need in order to be able to move on? Because you're upsetting this family, and they don't want you here anymore. You clearly have something that you need us to know. How can we help you to move on? So they negotiate with it. And this works. And when you have a relationship with the Loa, this really works. So in my work, I like doing this. Now, again, it makes me a heretic to some people out there, but I don't care, because I'm more concerned about doing the work than I am with my, perceived reputation. I don't need anybody's permission to do anything. Okay. I govern my own principles. I govern my own code of ethics and my own morality, which I think is much higher than the rest of the world. When you look at it, I mean, I don't mean to pat myself on the back, but I think I'm doing pretty well. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't need anyone's permission. And if they don't like it, then don't follow me, unfollow me, unsubscribe from this channel if it bothers you. But I'm going to continue to help people, and this is the way I do so, and I've been very successful at it, and I'm not going to stop just because you don't like it. That's the way I feel about it. Anyway.
So there.
Yeah, they're so there. So Danielle, hopefully that answers your question. Brandon, what's our next one?
So our third one comes from April. She says, I keep seeing references to the Desert Fathers. Who are they?
The Desert Fathers. Yeah, I talk about them often. The Nicolaitan Catholic Church is based upon Desert Father. Yeah, Desert Father Christianity. And essentially what they are the forerunners to Christian monasticism. Okay, so they sort of give us the model that became the foundation to Christian monasticism in the Middle Ages, essentially. They were basically men and women who just abandoned society and went out to live in the desert to be as hermits alone with God. And they lived a truly Christian aesthetic life around the 200s or so. So very early days of Christianity. This is pre-Nicene times. So you're talking before even the tenets of the faith were completely ironed out. So there's a lot of theological diversity to a certain extent amongst some of the Desert Fathers. In fact, one of the Desert Fathers, well, I mean, I don't even remember if the name was preserved or not, because there were so many of them. There are ones that became famous and people would seek them out, but there were others that were just out there and weren't remembered in any historical sense. But there were some that were their graves were found, and they would be buried with their sacred texts. And there was one that was buried with Nag Hammadi texts.
Yeah, he was clutching it.
Yeah, clutching. He was holding it. You know, which goes to show you that that even though we don't consider that the Bible today, or we don't consider that the Word of God in a modern Christian sense, or even a post-Nicene sense, there's spiritual value there, that with all of the Christian theological diversity that existed, there were desert fathers that found value in it, and these were their sacred texts. That it was probably thunder. I would think it was probably that text that because that's a very powerful one for me.
Yeah,
it really is. So these are who they were, and we model this church on that, because this was before there was a Vatican. This was before there was political authority in the church. This was before there was dogmatism. Okay, this is when it was okay to be a philosopher and to just be alone with God and figure things out on your own. And that's what inspired me to do the work that I do today. That's how I live my life. That is my Christianity. And so I govern this church by those same principles. And the people that founded this church and put me in charge of it had similar principles. And so that's why I talk a lot about the Desert Fathers, but they are truly inspirational. And what's really kind of cool about them, if I may just say one more thing, Father. If I just say one more thing, what's really cool about them is that they didn't always have access to the sacraments. Going off to be a hermit, these weren't priests. I mean, I imagine some of them might have been, but most of them were not, and they probably couldn't even get things like bread and wine all the time, right? Because they were truly away from the world. But people would seek them out, and sometimes priests would go to them, and then they would receive the sacraments when that would happen, if that would happen. But they never lost their nourishment from God, so it showed. And the early church understood this. Today, not so much. There were secret sacraments that God nurtures through grace, different things when their conditions are right for it. And so they had access to secret experiences with God that we will never even truly understand, because we don't do that. We don't go and abandon the world to live alone with God and just wait for him to find us. It's always done through methodical means, or it's done through some kind of ritual dogmatism and the memorization of Bible verses and Catholic answers. Another example of how some people think that that's religion. There's a lot of diversity, and we like that diversity. We embrace that diversity in this church, and that's why we talk about things that no one else talks about, because we're not afraid of it. We actually like it. Father, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that there's a really good book a famous book by Benedict Ward, who The Sayings of the Desert Fathers, which I think I've recommended this on the show before.
Yeah, I think I have.
I'd recommend that to anybody to buy. So you can read what they were saying. And a couple of other things. St. Benedict, of course, had experience of the Desert Fathers, and he took their essence, and he's the father of Western monasticism. So Western monasteries came out of that inspiration of the Desert Fathers directly. And also, I was going to say that it does still exist on Mount Athos. There are monks that live in that way and have these amazing experiences. I've spoken to some who, it's just unbelievable. They literally speak to the saints.
Yeah.
In person, in their room. Like it's unbelievable. But we do need both. I just want to caution against, because they would reject the idea of spiritual superiority. They just say, well, I have this life and I have these experiences. But we do need both, because we also need people to live in the world.
Well, because you have to serve the people of the world too. And,
Yeah. And St. Paul, offer God your rational worship. We need both, right?
Yeah.
We need at the heart of the church the experience of those that are set apart from God to live a monastic life, a celibate life, a very difficult existence.
Well, look at the Carthusians. They're like a Western example of that Desert Father Christianity. The Carthusians live in isolation even amongst themselves.
And I'm sure those experiences happen in the Western Church too.
Oh yeah.
In places like that, and we need them, but we also need people to feed the hungry and clothe the naked. And
Oh yeah.
So it's always that balance, and I think that's why. I mean, I like the kind of essence of the Orthodox model where their bishops are pretty much all ex-monks from Mount Athos. You know? So they have, in the very heart of their diocese, they have this sort of, at least even if it was a few years ago, they've got a memory of that essence. And so,
sure.
And the truth is, in our own lives, we need a mixture of both. I live a very secular life. I live in the world, but that's why we also need to have the daily retreat to prayer, and also, I don't live
enough of a secular life, honestly. And so I try to remind myself how to be secular by indulging in various things of the secular life. I think that's why I do, because I actually hate cooking. People think I love to cook because my Instagram's all about food posts, and I cook, a lot of food. I don't like cooking. I hate cooking. I'm just a really good cook, and I like to eat. And eating for me is a spiritual experience, but it's a way of kind of connecting to the secular world in a way that I can kind of have both, in a sense that I can have the spiritual experience of sharing a meal with good friends and having something special every night with really good wine. But at the same time, be connected still to things that people do in the world, eating fine, gourmet meals and everything else, or drinking good wine. Because particularly now, I live in the woods. I've got acres surrounding me of nothing. And I am most of the time. I mean, my wife is the one that works operations at our business. I do not. I do all the behind scenes stuff. So I'm alone with God most of the time. My son has a homeschool program, and I do a lot of that with him. But outside of that, most of what I'm doing is prayer. So I sometimes need to be grounded back, I think, to sort of reality by having secular interests and going on vacation, going to different countries to spend time with other people.
I'm doing the opposite.
Yeah, you're doing the opposite?
Yep. Hiding in the woods with the animals.
To do all my business.
Yeah, we'll have Father Justin.
Father Justin to do all my business.
Oh yeah,
and
there you go.
I'll be at peace.
We'll be right back in a few moments here after our break to welcome Michelle Ferguson to the show to talk about the Akashic Records. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone, to the second hour of Vestiges After Dark. Tonight, the topic is the Akashic Records, and we have brand new guest Michelle Ferguson to join us to talk about this exciting and new topic. We'll be taking your questions in the third hour. She's not going to be with us the whole hour, but she will be here to take some of your questions. So our moderators will log them in from the chat. And if you want to call into the show, we'll have that number up on the screen when we open lines. But we got some interesting stuff to talk about tonight. Don't go anywhere. Okay, so let's begin. Let's get started with this exciting topic tonight. Tonight, we are joined by Michelle Ferguson, a remarkable psychic whose deep connections span all energies on Earth and extend to beings throughout the multiverse. Michelle specializes in helping individuals uncover their life paths by guiding them through their past lives, including detailed explorations of their experiences in this lifetime. Her work empowers people to tap into their own spiritual gifts, enabling a true understanding of their higher self. Whether it's navigating the complexities of the Akashic Records or addressing spiritual disturbances, Michelle's healing abilities traverse both physical and spiritual realms. With a passion for helping her clients at whatever level they are comfortable, Michelle is here today to share her profound insights and transformative healing techniques. Let's welcome Michelle Ferguson to Vestiges After Dark. How are you doing tonight, Michelle?
Hey, Michelle.
I'm doing awesome. Can you guys, everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you just
Absolutely.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is great.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And one thing I always like to do with new guests is I like for them to kind of talk about how they came to become a participant in their particular topic? So for you, it's the Akashic Records. What was the starting point for you?
Well, I've always known I've had abilities ever since I was a child. So it's like going to school or going to college. Like, you want to keep gaining more knowledge and keep going different places. You don't want to be stuck in the same thing. So even if you study religion, you're still wanting to like learn the new things. You don't want to be, your mind constantly wants more information. So I just naturally gravitated to, because I've always been connected to the universe as well, and pretty much have said I'm an alien since I was a child. So I was kind of already there anyway. So yeah.
So from the starting points, all you've ever known. Okay, I can understand that, and I can relate to that to a certain degree. I really can. I know what that's like to a large extent, which is probably why I do some of the weirdness that I do. So I can appreciate it on a deep level. But so let's, I guess, one question we get a lot, and this is why we wanted to do a show on this topic, because we get questions all the time on this show and even in email about the Akashic Records. I've always tried to explain it, and because for my model, my background's psychology and philosophy. But psychology was my undergraduate degree. And we spent a lot of time, I spent a lot of time specializing in personality theory with one of the best theorists of all time, Carl Jung. And he had a concept that he had brought into his particular range of, or his model, I should say, of personality theory, called the collective unconscious, which essentially is this universal database, you might say, of information of the entire species. It's been built into our DNA. That's where it exists, and it is a way that we connect to each other and the entirety of the universe through this thing he calls the collective unconscious that we're all aware of, but only on that deeper unconscious level. It's affecting us, but we're not really consciously aware of how much or how pervasive it is. It's just there. So he would say that, like, the instincts of a mother come from the collective unconscious, because it's built into her DNA to automatically sort of know how to properly care for her child. Animals clearly can do this. And he said the way that we communicate with this realm, because it is a completely unconscious realm of experience, is through archetypes. That bridges the gap, that the archetypes communicate through us. So he studied I Ching and tarot and runes and a lot of divinatory practices as a means to facilitate an archetypal communication with this realm of the collective unconscious that is built within all of us. I, as a person who has studied both psychology and metaphysics and understands the Akashic Records to a certain degree, I kind of see them as the same thing. So I'm curious to see if you agree with that, and I would like to get your particular definition for what the Akashic Records is.
It's not just the records of people, it's the records of every living thing all time. So you pretty much have to believe in past lives if you want to get your Akashic Records read, because your energy retains that information from every life that you've lived throughout the universe or on Earth. And so that affects your life today too. And so you can tap into those things and realize things about yourself that, like I say, I'm completely different from everybody. And it didn't matter what things that you get from your parents and, little traits like that, but like even their thought processes, like I just never subscribed to any of that. Even as a kid, I just instinctively knew I was different. I was on a different something. I didn't know what it was, but yeah. And so I was kind of alone in it. But now that both of my parents have passed on, now they kind of now they understand. So that's awesome. But not that they've passed on, but that they understand.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So would you say it's a realm? Do you see it as a location in the universe or outside the universe? Do you see it as a principle or a concept? or just basically a database that we can tap into? How do you define it?
Depends on the person.
Okay.
So, like, it is a living thing, but it presents itself differently to the reader. So, like, I am a history nerd. Like, if you threw me in some old library in Scotland, I would be there for days. Like, right?
Sure.
So when I go in, it presents itself as this never-ending library, and whatever questions I ask for whomever I'm asking them for, like, I see them, the masters of the Akashic Records, and they bring forth like scrolls and different things because they call them soul contracts. So every life that you live, you make a soul contract for your energy. You know, I'm willing to go here and do this and live this life. You know, and then there's obviously your freedoms and your futures and the things that you can build yourself.
Sure.
Upon that, within that. So it helps people get to those futures too, because sometimes there's clogs in your life, but you're not picking up on it yet. But then something will click when you get one of these readings and you're like, okay. And then it clicks and you're like, it's a relief because you're like, yes, now that makes sense. And now I can like clear it, or I can work with it, or, you know, whatever the situation is.
Sure. So for you then, it's malleable in a sense that it changes with who you're working with and how they're approaching the particular experience of interacting with the records.
Yeah. And whatever they're ready for is what is presented. And even if they think they're ready for something, if I'm not supposed to go there yet, I get told, no, we're not going there yet. So it's controlled by them, but you have to be in a very calm, very meditative, very just listening, you know, that kind of mind frame to the messages that you're getting back. So if people aren't ready yet, they could get a little irritated in readings, kind of like, well, they think they are. But then when something rolls around a little bit later down the line, when they figure it out themselves, they're like, oh, I wasn't ready yet. Yeah. Like something else had to happen before, you know, it's a timeline kind of thing. Yeah.
And it transverses time. I'm going to imagine that,
yeah.
You know, it has past, present, and future all working in one cohesive way.
Yes. Yes. So I like when I've gone into mine, I can see all of my past lives throughout all of the universe and past lives on Earth, like all of them. I have my own journal that I've written them all down, but mine is huge and it just keeps going and going. And so like I've been told, no, you're not ready for that yet. And then later on, like, okay, now we're going there. Like, so it happens to everybody.
Right.
Like, yeah.
So,
I mean, this is like a lot of universal information and a lot of things opening up to like fill in the puzzle pieces, kind of.
Sure.
What we've been missing.
Which would be overwhelming, I would imagine, for, you know, most people. Because, I mean, let's face it, there's not a lot of people doing spiritual inner work these days. It's people have fallen away and become quite apathetic, and at least in my experience. I mean, occasionally I come across people in like the audience for this show who are, you know, thirsty for the learning this stuff. But I mean, the average person's probably not ready, right? Would you say?
Yeah. Well, and even like Jesus, I talk to Jesus. I refer to him as an ascended master. He's a healer. You know, his life was real. And then I find it tragic just because, like, the Bible's been edited and gutted in pieces here and there, and I want this story in there and whatever, so many times that the complete story of somebody is lost. And I'm a history nerd, and I'm like, but I want those pieces.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of things like that people are getting from the Akashic Records. And then when they're ready, and they're ready to, like, go and find, like, where they've lived in the universe, then that's like just taken up like a whole new realm. And that's when you start to ascend and go through like different levels, and they call them like the Earth is on 3D, you can get up to 5D. There's like 10 different frequencies. But they pretty much say like you get to heaven through your body. So I know a lot of religions will say like your body is a temple, and like in this realm, like what I'm talking about, they're literally talking about your chakras and raising your vibrations so that you're literally emanating like love and joy and peace and bringing that to yourself and grasping onto the heavens, and like you're open to it, you're broadcasting to it, it's broadcasting to you.
Sure. Like a transmitter. It's like, I've always likened, I think, the human mind to really being sort of like a receiver, that I'm not entirely sure, we're completely here, that I think a lot of us is really more so out there, and that it sort of just gets channeled in to this one localized form that we call physicality. Now, when you look at the Akashic records of somebody, are you able to pick a starting point, or does it sort of just guide its own way?
It pretty much guides its own way. If somebody has specific questions, then I ask those questions, but I pretty much just get guided through their whole story, unless you, of course, you hit one of those roadblocks like, no, can't open that door yet.
Right.
But yeah.
And who is it that governs this? Like you said, that are these ascended masters that govern this information?
Yeah. Well,
okay.
they're the masters of the Akashic Records. So you can pretty much think of them of like librarians, if they were like gods or goddesses or
right.
whatever, something like that. Like,
okay.
But it's alive and it's functioning at the same time. So you have to think of like tech, but bio and alive as well, because it's storing what energy collects, what your soul collects, and all of your stories through all time. So it can get very, very long in some people's cases, and it just depends on the person and how open they are to what they're going to get.
Could a future trauma affect someone now?
Well, futures can be changed.
Okay.
Always. But a future trauma wouldn't affect you now. A trauma could affect you if you had one in a past life, or obviously in this life. But the Akashic Records can help you, even in this life, understand why that trauma happened, even if it's completely, ugly, unfair, violent, horrendous, like, the worst that humans can do to each other.
Sure.
Like, I don't even want to go down that depressing path, but whatever it is, I hate to say there's a reason for everything, because things like that are another person's choice, but that's kind of always the back lesson. Like, that was another person's choice to do that. That was not your choice, and it's not yours to hold. And so sometimes going into your Akashic Records helps you understand why that person did and acts the way that they do, so that you can have that forgiveness, because forgiveness is releasing it from you and just giving it back to the person. Like, I'm not holding that anymore. Like, that's yours, man. Yeah.
Well, I would imagine it's helpful to kind of figure those things out, particularly if there's repressed information. So
yes,
it works,
it's in your subconscious.
Yes. And it gets buried there, and it becomes toxic over time, as I'm sure you see a lot.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. I mean, you help people, right? You do readings for people.
I do.
And so talk about your work.
So especially I'll just talk about if I'm working with somebody that's gone through trauma. I'm an empath, so I can read people anyway, but I read my clients even through like over Zoom, or if they're with me, it doesn't matter. And I will stop session and like bring them like back down to earth, or like, calm them down, or like my job is not to like make someone face their trauma and have a mental freaking breakdown. Like,
Right.
I don't let things go that far.
Sure.
You know, I will see how bad it is. And if it's bad, I will just tell them like, it's really bad. And I have sent people to like, I think work with me, but you need to go like find a psychiatrist because this is going to impact, you know, like you need that help too.
Yeah.
So like, I don't discount anything when I'm helping people, but I definitely don't let it get to the point where like I'm making them more traumatized. I'm like, no, we don't do that. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, no, that's important. We do the same thing actually, because a lot of what we do is spiritual problem resolution. Not unlike, I mean, different from how you do it, but not unlike for the same reasons. And a lot of times, almost all the time, honestly, that we always encourage them to continue to work with a therapist, or if they don't have one, we help them to find one. Just because I prefer a holistic approach to spiritual healing. And if look, spiritual trauma is going to affect people emotionally and psychologically, whether they want it to or not. So it's best to have somebody that can, you know, work with that expertise or that arena, and that clears the space for us to be able to do the spiritual work. So do you find that to be true?
Yeah, and even if people are not comfortable with like the level that Akashic Records can go to, you know, like they're just not there with aliens and I'm part of that or whatever it is. Like even to just learn through, because I'm a healer too. I work with energy and Reiki and all of these things and energy psychology, which has nothing to do with mental health, by the way.
Right,
It's just the name of it. It's like tracing meridian lines to heal pain and stuff like that.
Understood.
But even just learning how to relax yourself, like if you go to a Reiki master and learn those things to help yourself when you have anxiety and those different things, like those things are very, very important too, to learn how to get yourself into a calm space. And you learn those things from going to like acupuncture or going into like meditation or energy work, or even like going to sessions with like your priest or your therapist, and just, or art or whatever is like your release, but you're not trying to just shove it back and forget about it, because then that makes it worse, you know.
Always. Always.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah. What about like the in between lives experience? Is that information that you can derive from this interaction?
So like their past lives?
Well, I'm talking like, for example, the afterlife condition, because I would imagine that there's in this model that you utilize, that there's space for what happens between each individual lifetime. Are you able to see that?
Well, that's when you start a new soul contract. So when people actually move on to their next one as part of their journey, but like I'm a medium, so I see spirits too. And my parents are with me. They've passed on and they will continue to be with me until I guess I don't need them anymore, which it's not going to happen in this lifetime. But you know, like, so would people go to the next life is up to them and what is happening there. So would you get, like, I've gone really far into my records, so when I pass on from here, I kind of know what the next path is, kind of. So it kind of, it takes that fear away from death, at least for me. Like, I'm not afraid of death. Not that I want to die, but
right.
When people make death so like gloomy and doomy, and I hate I hate the word sin. I know you guys, you know, that's your thing, but I think it's a very dangerous word, because people can put that word against themselves in a very negative way.
Oh, they absolutely do.
I'm a sinner because I think like this, or whatever it is. So that's why I don't like that word. But yeah, it helps people understand, like, in their core who they are too. and their own gifts. Like, it doesn't even have to be psychic gifts, but maybe you're just like a healer of people because you're very good at speaking or whatever it is. But everybody's got their own gifts. Everybody's got their own talents. And so you have to kind of get away from like what life puts you through, and like kind of how you said, you spend a lot of time with God, right? You spend a lot of time thinking and meditating, or how I would say it, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure. No, that's exactly how I would say it too.
Everybody needs that time
yeah.
for themselves, to find themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's part of what happens in these sessions too, for the people that don't have that yet. Yeah.
And do you find a lot of people don't have that? Do you find that most of them don't, or how would you break it down?
There's unfortunately a lot of people out of there that just don't have self-love.
Yeah.
And if you don't have self-love, like, you're in trouble from the beginning. You're in trouble from not just negative people, but negative energies, negative spirits. I mean, you got to get that self-love, and unfortunately people are just nasty to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to find a way to get past, well, this nastiness happened to me, but I don't want my life to be that. So we're going to make a different future.
And that's, so you help people to do that, to build a new future.
Yeah. I help them find themselves. And if there are people that I've had to turn away, or now I don't work with them or whatever, because I have warned them, like, either about their health or about something attacking them negatively, like something is going to go wrong because of the mental situation, that whatever is going on, and they continue to put themselves in danger, then I won't work with them anymore, because I'm like, this is just pointless, because you keep messing with things that you shouldn't be messing with.
A waste of time.
But you don't want to help them drive off a cliff, right?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. It's like,
if you're gonna go, let them go on their own.
But you don't need to be helping them.
Right.
yeah, it's like, I'm the messenger, and then after that, if you don't want to help yourself, then there's nothing I can do about it.
But I think you've hit on something that I think is so, like, self-love and the ability to forgive yourself is really hard. And it's like, I think it's a real high form of spiritual maturity. It's really difficult to achieve. And because I know you said you don't like the word sin, and I understand why, because of the, it's like all words in English, they end up just piled on with all sorts of contexts that are unhelpful.
Yeah.
But I mean, the essence of it is that, because I know you're not saying this, because some people, let's not talk about sin. Well, no, what you're dealing with is the fact that sins have happened to people and they've done things that they feel guilty
right.
about.
So, and they're putting that on themselves. Yeah. Like, I'm a sinner. Oh my gosh. The horrible thing. Yeah.
And the whole purpose of what it should be in the life of I'm not saying it's what it is, what it should be in the life of the church is guiding people in exactly that way to reach a point where, I mean, obviously a priest can objectively say, okay, God forgives you. But for me, that's the easy bit. Like the hard bit is helping somebody, including myself, reach a point of self-forgiveness and tangibly instantiating that grace. The grace is given by God, but can we receive it? For me, like parish priests I've been in that situation. We're so busy doing the stuff that we've neglected that coaching role. It's
it's just that same thing is just getting people out of that dark spot. Like, everybody's doing it, but in a different way. Yeah.
That's what we face. And we deal, I think the word exorcism is another one of those provocative terms, like sin, with a lot of misconception associated with it. And I have to try to reel people back in a lot, because they want the more paranormal Hollywood sort of storyline. It's not like that. So a lot of it is that most people's demons, what they become possessed by, are their own self-hatreds, their own I call them created or thought forms. They're basically egregores that they produce. So do you encounter that? I'm sure you do, but I mean, when you encounter, let me rephrase what I was about to say. When you encounter a client that is possessed by this self-negativity, this self-hatred, this self-loathing, how do you go about correcting that? Like, what's your process for that?
Well, first I scan all of their chakras because I want to know what's affected by this and their health by whatever's going on in their life, whether it's just emotional or some spirits decided to hang out. I don't know. But if they're horribly bad, one, they don't come into my environment until they're a little cleansed, because I keep my environment very like
Yeah.
But I'll go to them if I have to. And I've had to cleanse houses. I've had to close portals. I've had like what in the world have y'all been doing in here? Like, what is this? And like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So, but if they don't listen after that, and one, it's either, okay, you either think I'm just full of it and some crazy lady, or you're just blowing off whatever I say because you like what's happening to you, or you're not ready to stop it, one or the other. But it's the same thing as kind of like people that are on like a drug addict level, whatever. You can't make them stop. They have to want to do it themselves.
Right.
So it's the same thing, and it gets really frustrating because I want to help them, but I'm like,
yeah,
okay, sorry, like we're kind of at the end of the road here, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that is a challenge. I mean, we face that too. People think that when I come in, am going to act like a wizard and say an incantation and everything goes away. It's, I am a facilitator. I think basically, if I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, and I think I am, you see yourself also as a facilitator. It's the person themselves that has to do the work. You can guide them. Yes. You can give them direction. You can give them perspective, but you can't do it for them.
Yeah, you can help them raise their vibration.
Yeah.
You can help them raise their vibration, but it's up to them to keep it and to keep going higher.
I can do that for them. I can do a hardcore Reiki session for people.
But it's temporary, right?
You have to maintain that and want that in your life. Yeah. And I think a lot of especially church members and things, I've seen a lot of people afraid to go to someone upper in their church, whatever it's bishop or reverend or whatever it's called.
We see it too.
We see
all the time.
We see it a lot.
They're like, am I crazy or what is happening or, kind of thing. But if you just listen to people with compassion, it's pretty easy to figure out if okay, are you really out of your mind and need to go to a hospital, or is something really happening to you, because are they talking coherently? Are they making, at least making sense how they're speaking?
Sure.
Maybe not what they're speaking about, but if you just listen to people and have a conversation, that breaks down so many walls with anybody.
It's true.
And so it's more important now than ever.
Therapists.
Yeah.
I mean, therapists like you and clergy were basically trained to help people to voice the narrative that's going on in their mind, and then subject that to their own, analysis as they understand it, and say, is what your mind's producing a reasonable and honest and helpful thing, and then how do we deal with that?
And we're all unbiased coming into somebody's whatever situation, and so we're like, oh hey, and so you can bring things to people's attention that they might not be aware of, and oh right, and then little things like that can help. And I tell people all the time, the only way to fight negativity of any kind, whether it's a person or a spirit or demons or whatever you want to call it, whatever level you want to go to, is with love. So that's why I talk about self-love so much. It's don't make yourself such a target for these negative things to happen to you.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, people are complicit in these actions. It's people are one of the biggest deficits of the church. Okay, and I'm the first one to say this, and I call it out all the time, and I think you'll agree with this, is that evil has no power of its own. Evil only has the power we give it. And when we put out hate and negativity and fear is the biggest one, I think, then that's what you get back.
Fear leads to all the others.
It does.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's anybody that's skeptical at all about any kind of energy work or anything at all what I do, I literally okay, just imagine you've been invited to dinner to somebody's house, well, you knock on the door, you got your food with you, and to contribute, you're like, hey, but as soon as the door opens, you can feel it. Even though they have a smile plastered on their face, you can feel it if somebody was just in a really big argument.
Yeah. I've had
even
that
if
happen.
they're trying to fake it.
Oh, yeah.
That is energy. It's there.
And the more you do work like this,
Absolutely.
whether you're doing it from the metaphysical side or the religious side, or as I do both, the more you do it, the more sensitive you get to it. It becomes more natural. It awakens parts of you, I think. And then if you have the proclivity from childhood, then it really sort of cements itself, and you can just feel it. I mean, you walk in. I mean, we've been in houses a lot of times. If there's a disturbance in an environment, well, almost all the time when there's a disturbance in the environment, we have to go. We have to go there. They can't come to us. And so when
that's what I said, I'm like, you're not coming to my house.
Yeah, right. That's true. I used to have people come to my house, and it became it was such havoc. I said no more. So now we have a public location now that they can come to, where we can do assessments, but we'll still work in people's homes when we feel that the environment is the source of the issue, or at least plays a big part in it. But I can tell you, when we walk into these places, the air is thick with. It's like you can taste the negativity. Yeah. It's like syrup sticking to you. It's awful.
And people don't understand that can also affect their health very negatively.
Absolutely.
I'm not just talking like heart disease, but it can make autoimmune disorders, like inflammatory disorders,
stomach issues.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, anything. It can produce all of it.
Yeah.
Migraines. Well, the physical and the spiritual is not separate.
They're not.
Right.
And we all. What's so weird is that the sort of new atheists were trying to sort of superimpose that on religious people to say, oh, you see this division. It's like, we don't see this division. You're actually speaking into a division. You're saying there's no spirituality. So it's kind of. But lots of Christians fall into this trap of a basic Gnostic kind of, our flesh and blood is separate from our pure spirit. And, actually the church rejected that a very long time ago. Unfortunately, lots of Christians didn't get the memo. These things, you can't separate those things. And psychology tells people that, if you are, depression is a physiological and a psychological phenomenon. If you are stuck in that for a long period of time, you may not kill yourself acutely, but you will suffer ill health and death as a result of that.
Yes.
You will.
Yes. And I just lost my mom not too recently, but she was in a very abusive, negative relationship for many years. I'm talking 20 some years.
Oh my. And
it took that long to kill her, but I literally say that he killed her because he over all of that time stripped everything from her,
destroyed her spirit.
It's that chronic stress,
you have to watch, even when you're going through things in life, don't put your stuff on other people, because they've already got stuff. You don't just throw your energy off at people like that and expect it to be okay. That's not okay. So,
Well,
and
that's
if you're
why I
going
like
through
St.
something,
Augustine's.
like ask, like,
Yeah.
can I talk to you? Can I get whatever?
Yeah.
But that's why I like that definition of sin being in the sin state, turned in on yourself. And because that's what happens, right?
Exactly.
Your wounding and everything else becomes all consuming, and you forget that other people have got that. All those things going on in you are going on in everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone. And you never know somebody's story unless they tell you the story. And then, there's always other sides of it because there's other people. But like, you just don't ever assume anything about anybody because you never know what they've gone through. You never know. So that's my message to everybody. Just learn to love yourself and talk to people and get to know people again. Like, put your dang phones down and like start to talk to each other.
Recurring message, the same
Understand
message
each
we had
other.
last week. Yep, just love each other. Yep.
Yeah,
That was last week's
exactly.
message. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
What would you say, Michelle, is the biggest misconception that you see in your clients and the people that you help about your work in the Akashic Records? What would you say is the big one that you'd like to perhaps set the record straight for our audience?
well, that depends on how high you've like ascended in your vibrations is where we kind of go with it. But if people aren't ready for the whole alien part of it, that like there's really like that, it kind of puts them off from even wanting to get one.
Okay.
But like I said, if they're not ready to go there, I'm not going to be shown that anyway.
I see.
And if it is something that is supposed to be told to them and they're ready, then I'll be told, I'll be shown. Yeah.
Let's talk about that then. What when you say the alien thing, you've mentioned it a few times. So I'm assuming what you mean is that, or maybe it's more than this, but I'm assuming you're saying that we have lives not just here on Earth as human beings, but as other species and other planets. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yes.
And they're not ready for that information.
Some people are not. No. But once you get to that point and you're accepting of it, of just understanding that you're everybody's a part of the entire universe, everything is, to the tiniest little organism, to everything. Like, once you understand that and accept that, it can help you understand a lot of the health problems that you're going through, because we're still a part of that DNA and like have cycled down through things. And so just like our human DNA being like part ape, well, it makes us very aggressive because chimpanzees are closest relative. They're very aggressive.
Very.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
We have that in us, right?
Sure.
So we have things like that have passed down through our alien lives that we've lived too, and past lives that, things that you might not have gotten through, but definitely things that affect your health and foods that you should or shouldn't eat, and all kinds of things that you should do to clean your body out. And yeah.
Is there a progression? Is there a progression for are there like lower planets that are worse than this one that we start out on and move up, or is it like an up and down kind of thing?
Well, humans are in the third dimension. So you just keep raising even as you raise your vibration, like you'll raise dimensions and you'll start to see different things, and like it's hard to explain without sounding like some hippie that just dropped acid. I'm not hanging with Timothy Leary.
Try us anywhere. Try us anyway.
I'm sure we've heard it before, so don't worry.
The more your mind opens, the more you can see.
Right.
It's like getting a college education. Well, now the more you know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the more you open your vibrations to it, the more you're going to understand and see and retain. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Aliens. Is there interaction between worlds? Do you think so? You think they're visiting us?
I see and speak to them all the time. Yes, and I could put on a light show in my yard. Yes.
Interesting, because I'm very fascinated with the alien phenomenon. I've had experiences of a personal nature that led me to really sympathize with people that have had a abduction experience. I'm not saying that I was abducted. I don't actually think I was. But I've had the experience of waking up and finding grays in my room. I've talked about that on this show.
Yeah.
What do you think they are? I mean, a lot of people think they're demons. I don't subscribe to that, but what are your thoughts on some of these encounters with it? Like, people are saying that they're being abducted, sexual materials being stolen from them. Some people say the government has made a deal with them to allow so many abductions if they leave us alone. What are your thoughts on all that?
It's part of all of those stories.
Is it? Interesting.
Yeah. There are deals with government agencies and so many black ops projects. It's just gross. Like Robert Bigelow, if you know who that is.
Oh yeah.
Like
Skinwalker Ranch guy.
Words. Yeah. He's literally said, if you can imagine it on Star Wars or Star Trek or any of that future sci-fi, anything, if you can even imagine it, we've already been there, done it, made it, and you just don't know about it yet.
That's what some of these top advisors have said too. These retired military from, I think, Israel. There was one, a defense minister in Israel. Yeah.
So here's the secret. Well, here's the secret. You gotta use your psychic gifts. You guys have them too. Everybody has them. You gotta. If it's man-made, you're not gonna feel a vibe from it. Mm-hmm. I hone in on it and I feel things, and I'm like, I can feel things from them, and like love and compassion and things. If it's like some man-made thing flying across the sky, even if it makes no sound, it can go from here to there, and whatever they've made.
Sure.
It doesn't feel the same. It feels man-made. There's like nothing vibing off of it, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So there's a good clue for all the alien sky watchers now. Yeah. You still have to use your psyche eye. Yeah.
Sure. One question we get, and I want to make sure I get it in here before the next hour, is
I have to go soon.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you do. Yeah. You want to? You're staying till.
Like, I gotta go like now.
Okay, so at the end of this hour. Okay, so then let me ask you this question, and then we'll give you an opportunity to just talk about how people can contact you, get a reading, use your services. I want to make sure you have time for that. But I know a lot of people ask, how can they connect with the Akashic Records, not having any experience having done so? Is this something that they can do? Is this safe to do even? What would you recommend or give advice to people that are interested in that?
So just start exploring your own story, like even for past lives. Even if you're not a history nerd, there is still something in history that you're fascinated by.
Yeah.
Most likely that is a past life.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So start going there and start finding out like who your guides and your angels and your protectors are that are around you. Like I even call an Archangel Michael. Like they're real. They're real. So find out the ones that can help you, and there's ones that are specific to you, and then like ones like Archangel Michael that everybody can call. So as soon as you learn those things and learn how to protect yourself, then start exploring those past lives. And if you want to, you have to get certified to get into the Akashic Records. But yeah, once you start going on the psychic journey and start going down past life roads and you already feel the universe, like you're just going to go there anyway.
I see. So it's like the natural destination, that just sort of the next step. Well, Michelle, I thank you so much for being on the show. And I just want to give again an opportunity for you to just tell the audience how they can find you, your website, anything else that you want them to know.
So normally in this line of work, I go by Raven Willow, but that's okay.
Okay.
Yourself works fine. So everything is under Psychic Empath Raven Willow.
Okay.
So add in .com to that. That's my website. That's Instagram. It's Facebook. It's TikTok if we still have that. I don't know what's happening.
We'll see in a few months.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
Yeah. So everything is Psychic Empath Raven Willow, all one word. And I have a lot of articles, a lot of videos, a lot of classes on my website. So even if people can't afford a reading and they're just curious and they want to get info on these different things, I've written them all. I've done them all. So they're easy to access. And then you can just go on a little journey yourself and just start researching things.
Fantastic. Well, Michelle, thank you
Scratch
so much.
the surface on this one.
Yeah. This was a great and very informative, and it's been a wonderful discussion. I just want to thank you for coming on, and I'm sure our audience does too.
Yeah. If anytime you guys want to go deeper, invite me back, and I'll be back. This was a great show.
Great. Yeah, we'd love to have you back
Yeah.
on. Absolutely. We do 2 seasons a year. So Brandon will definitely be in touch. Yeah.
You piqued a few people's interest, so yeah.
You just whet their appetites tonight.
Yeah, that was an appetizer.
Well, thank you so much.
Goodbye,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you,
Take care.
Michelle. And we're going to just take our break right here. It's a good stopping point. And when we come back, we'll take your questions and we'll kind of digest what we just learned. Don't go away.
Cosmic dust falls from the sky. Between galactic, moving atoms in the masses, shooting stars above a sky made of static. All the secrets and enigma, but the answers in the light where it all became practic. Now the memories are stigma, all this energy compacted. A constellation of charisma here, then I saw what's with us, now we know that we're galactic. The answers in the light where it all became practic. Shooting stars above a sky made out of static. All their secrets and enigma, but the answers in the light where it all became galactic. Now the memories are stigma. All this energy compacted. A constellation of charisma hidden beneath humans with us. Now we know that we're galactic. The answers in the light where it all became galactic.
Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. This is the time where you can ask your questions in the chat or call into the show at 718-362-6380. That's 718-362-6380. Remember to enter PIN number 855-4111. That's 855-4111 to be placed into the queue. You can also call internationally free on Skype by dialing up Eye of the Seer. That was an interesting hour with Michelle Ferguson, the Akashic Records. We'll digest some of this material when we come back here, and we'll do our best to answer any questions you might have. We'll have her back on, I think. I think it would be interesting to go deeper, as she says. So we can start that process in this next hour. Don't go away. Okay, well, that was an interesting hour, and I'm sure many of you have questions. Let's, I guess, start with Jamie. What have you seen out there that might be something we could answer?
Well, I don't know if we can answer it or not, but not sure how to go on. What do you do when you are a medium? How are you not afraid of it? I guess he wants to know how he can control it or kind of master it.
I think, I mean, she would probably have a interesting response to that. I can say from my own personal experience, though, while I wouldn't necessarily define myself as a medium, a lot of what I have to do in terms of the work that God gave me, I guess you could say, does involve communication with spirits, and then they do reach out to you, and they do sometimes wake you up in the middle of the night, and they sometimes well, it's a medium experience. It's not me trying to communicate with the dead. It's just them communicating with me, and I'm very sensitive to it now.
I've become that way myself.
We all have. Anyone doing paranormal investigation for any length of time is going to experience some weakening of the psychic sensor, and the more you do this work at the level of an exorcist, the more that's true. So I can say, fearing it is. I mean, you have to understand that this is a biological response to strangeness. All right, we have a biological predisposition built into our genetics to fear things that are different. Like we were talking about in the first hour about food. It's the same principle here now with this. We are programmed. This is where racism comes from, by the way. This is where stereotyping comes from. We are programmed to look for things that are similar because we equate things that are recognizable as safe and things that are not recognizable as potentially dangerous or threat. And when you are lower on the food chain, this is how you survive. Okay. So things that are like you go towards. Things that are not like you stay away from or you fear. And fear comes out of that. It's a primitive response to the earlier times in our ancestors when we were eaten by larger animals. And so this is how you get by. Okay. But you have to know this. You have to go into it knowing that you're having a biological response and you are the master of your biology. Okay. No one else is. You are. You do not let your body tell you or your brain tell you how to feel. You tell it how to feel. You reverse it on itself. Now, this does take some practice and skill. It's not something that you master in a day. It comes with the territory, but it also comes with emotional and spiritual maturity. It's actually, I would say, a natural byproduct of developing your spiritual maturity. So fear is counterproductive in this context. It has its purpose. I mean, you want to be able to have that fight or flight response when you are faced with a scenario that might, warrant its use. But let's face it, most people are not going to be attacked by animals or hunted by a predator or something. So what ends up happening is that this function of our psychology just lies dormant for the healthy people, and the unhealthy people, what it does is it gets overexcited with anxiety and depression, causes anxiety and depression. And so in either scenario, the people don't have control over it, either apathetic to it or it controls them. You cannot let fear ever control you. And honestly, if you do have fear responses, you really shouldn't engage in any kind of psychic work until you have some control over it, until you've learned how to master fear. And I think the best way to master fear is to face them. It's to approach it and realize that, look, the worst thing that can happen is you die, and that's not that bad. We've made it out to be like the be-all and end-all of horrible things. Death. But death is no big deal. Look, everything dies. Everything goes through it. Billions, trillions upon trillions of people did this before you. You are not the first. You will not be the last. It's part of the human experience. And I think we need to approach death with that understanding. Instead of being afraid of it and trying to do everything in our power to avoid it or prolong it, embrace it. It is what it is. It's part of the human experience. And honestly, you really would not want to be without it, because you know what death does for us? It forces the condition that evil cannot exist forever. Death eventually consumes evil too. And so that is its primary function. Okay? We don't have to be afraid of anything. And ghosts are not, there's nothing fearful about that. What do you think? Is Casper the Ghost, like those three little guys that used to torment him and they're going to jump out of the wall and spook you? There's no reason to be afraid of it. Okay, so yeah, the dead are around. We can connect with them. They're just people. You're just a person. They're probably more afraid of you than you are of them because they don't know what's going on. You do. So, I think it's a perspective thing. And I'm not trying to talk down to anybody that feels this fear. I'm trying to encourage them to understand that, no, get control of it. You dictate the terms. Don't let your body dictate the terms to you. You control it. Okay, you control how you feel about things and how you approach things. That's how I do it. And honestly, it's easier for me, though. I have a broken fear response. I really do. Fear I don't really have it. I can be startled but I don't really feel fear. It's more like surprise. But I mean, I'm not afraid of scenarios or situations, and definitely not ghosts and demons. That's the last thing I fear. If I had a fear, it'd be people, because people they can really fuck you up. I mean, let's just be honest.
Yeah.
Father, what are your thoughts on fear?
I think I can't remember verse and number, but didn't Jesus say something about do not fear those who have power over your life, but fear him who has power over life and death?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's the kind of I think like most people, I don't relish the dying process.
No, because pain's never a pleasurable thing.
Suffering, getting old and immobile, all that stuff. I don't relish that, but I have no fear of death. And that's not because I'm presumptuous enough. And at my funeral, nobody will be saying, "Oh, he's in heaven now." That's a presumption.
You're not going to be with the angels. You're not going to earn your wings, Father.
Mm-hmm. That's right. No wings for me. Yeah.
Fitted for your halo.
So, yeah, that's right. Hopefully a halo one day, but I'm not going to presume. And I'll have the DSE ray read at my funeral.
There you go.
That's one of my absolute pet hates. But anyway, So fear is a really
it's primal,
debilitating.
It's primal.
Yeah, and
that's why it's debilitating.
It's instinctive.
Yeah.
We can't ignore it. It's the same reason that sugar and fat, we want to eat it. It's like fear. Because fear itself is neither bad nor good. It's how it's applied. Like I've just said, fear of the Lord is a great thing, right? Not that we're afraid of God, but the fear connected to respect and devotion, and of course, if you're in the jungle in India, you should be afraid of a tiger. It can kill you. It's when fear, and so that saves your life, right? But when you are trapped in a kind of psychic or psychological or a spiritual fear trap, that is not protecting you. That's actually harming you. And when it comes to, like you say, involved in exorcism ministry, people think, oh, how on earth can you do this? You must be so terrified all the time. No, I'm not. Because I basically, to put it bluntly, I just tell them to piss off. Just piss off. Like, you actually have no power over me because I know who has power over you and me. Mm-hmm. And
you're always working from the advantage. See, that's the thing, is that one thing that human beings have that nothing else has is that we're made in his image. And so that always gives us the advantage, always, in all circumstances.
And he's redeemed us.
Yeah.
He's redeemed us too.
Yes.
Like, so when the devil says, "Oh, you're terrible, you did these awful things," I did, but God's redeemed me.
It's like
I've not done it. God's done it for me.
Not sure was the one that asked this question?
Yes.
Okay, so he follows up in the chat by saying, not worried about death, worried about judgment. Mm-hmm. And so this is how you resolve that one, because reconciliation is available. It's not, there's no reason to fear judgment because you have an option to avoid the consequences of it. And that's kind of, I think, I didn't want to go there with our guest tonight because I didn't want to detract from the actual subject matter. But when she said that she has she doesn't like the word sin, it's because I think people have a preconceived notion as to what it is. Sin is an opportunity to recognize what needs to be done. If you didn't have an awareness of sin, you wouldn't know how to fix things like judgment and death. Now you have a solution, because sin awakens you to the reality of it. So do something about it. Yeah. Judgment is not something to be feared. Judgment is something to be reckoned with.
The other positive side of sin is we all know in the new, well, if you don't, you should. I know, Bishop. But in the New Testament, the word in Greek is to miss the target, right?
Miss the mark,
in other words, you can't commit sin unless you're actually shooting for the target, right? So look, I mean, I don't want to encourage people to sin, but I'm with St. Paul. Where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. Don't stop trying. In other words, just because you can't hit the bullseye, like if you give up trying, well, then we've got a problem. Then you should fear judgment. But if you're trying, to hit the target, God knows you're going to miss. He already knows you're going to miss, and he's already decided to love you and forgive you and redeem you anyway.
The only people that have something to fear about death are the apathetic, the people that do squat shit about it. If you're a prolific sinner, but you're working on correcting that, even if it's just in the most minuscule of ways, you are in an infinitely better position than the person who's a really great guy, doesn't do anything wrong, but is completely apathetic.
Because they're self-serving, they're not trying to serve the perfect.
Correct.
And only when you're trying to serve the perfect do you realize you're missing, right? Because actually you're not perfect, but God bridges the gap. And it has bridged that gap permanently. And it's not temporary, it's not something you can lose, because it's God's fidelity, not yours. So the only thing I say is you've got to keep trying. And the person I can't say this to is me. So I'm guilty of this. I think, I'm somehow irredeemable. And I know that is just pride.
It is a pride response to think that you're irredeemable.
Who is our judge? Right. Who is our judge? It's Jesus Christ.
And what is the judgment of God? What is the judgment of God?
He would have forgiven Judas if Judas had asked for forgiveness.
Yeah. The judgment is against yourself. You create the conditions for the judgment. All right. Yeah. It's kind of like a person that commits a crime and instead of facing the court where the judge might have said, you know what, we're just going to, give you a slap on the wrist, pay a fine, and, just don't do it again. Yeah. But instead they just don't show up, and then they get a warrant for them, and now they are in bigger trouble. That's what apathy does to you. It's like you get more warrants on you, and then what you're doing is you're missing grace opportunities. And so, as I would say to anybody, as long as you're not apathetic, you're infinitely in a better position than 99% of the world, who is apathetic, by the way. Maybe not 99%, but pretty close to that number, I think.
Of the Western world.
Of the Western world.
True.
That is true.
I don't think that's true in the developing world. I think they're far less apathetic.
Well, they got more reason to focus on God, don't they?
They've got very ready needs, haven't they?
Yes. The better you live, the easier it is to be apathetic.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. But it's why, it's easier to get a camel through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom.
That's exactly what that means.
That's exactly what's behind it. It's not that money's evil.
No, it's like, if it makes you feel so good, why pursue anything else?
You become completely unaware of your utter dependence on God because you have these things that anesthetize you from being aware of
and make you feel self-important, because now you can buy your freedom. You don't need to earn freedom. You can just buy your freedom. And it makes you feel powerful. Babel,
really.
Yeah, it really is in a lot of ways. It is Tower Babel. It is. All right, Brandon, I'm sure you've seen some questions out there. What have you seen that as of interest?
I have. I'm going to go and skip to a couple of them because there's a really good question. It was from Timothy.
Yeah, I saw
he
that.
says, Yeah, he said towards you, Bishop, your gray story, couldn't the trickster archetype mess with the alien phenomenon to confuse people, especially with how common alien slash gray sightings are in the Western world?
Sorry, in North America.
Yeah.
In North America.
Well,
Why are they always in North America?
Well, they're not always. They're definitely in South America too.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
It does seem to be, though, more of a New World thing. So it's definitely like the Americas in general, where it seems to be focused on. But then again, Israel's had a lot of UFO sightings, a lot.
Sure.
So it's kind of all over. I think, and Russia has as well. Russia has a lot. I don't know about Grace though.
Biggest country on Earth. You think it'd have the most?
Yeah, well, you would think because it's yeah, it really is. So I don't think it was a trickster archetype because it didn't come across as an archetypal experience. It wasn't a vision. It wasn't a psychological encounter. It was a very deliberate encounter, just like I'm talking right now. I was fully awake for this. It wasn't dreamlike in any way, and there was really nothing that came out of it. All they did was observe me. That was it. There was no interaction. There was no information imparted. There was no weird deception, like, go and do this, or, anytime I've had encounters with trickster archetypes, there's always an agenda. This, if there was an agenda to this, it was strictly to figure me out. It was almost as if, who is this guy? And let's observe him for a while. That's what it felt like. And that was it. And like I said, these things took place while I was awake. And the only strangeness that came out of it was that I could not wake up my wife or my cats. I tried to wake, and I mean, cats are light sleepers. If you've ever had a cat, it doesn't take much to wake one up, and I couldn't wake up my cats. So it definitely it definitely followed the paradigm of what people report in these encounters, where, there's some kind of, like, I don't want to call it mind control, but it is sort of like a mind control. It's like
some kind of paralysis they put over.
Missing time, paralysis, that kind of thing. And like, my wife had no knowledge of this at all. And there was no waking either of them up. But these things just stayed in the corner looking at me. So that's just not trickster. And I didn't derive any kind of conclusion about this. It wasn't like maybe they were demons, or maybe it was a ghost, or a mistake as a or even maybe they're aliens. I'm not going to even go that far. I'm just going to say that I had an encounter with this phenomenon that people call grace. That's all I'm going to say. I don't even have a preconception as to what it is. And it happened 2 times, and then it never happened again. What it is, I'm not entirely sure. I can just say that the larger opinion in the world about this phenomenon is that they are a species of alien that is currently interacting negatively with this world, because it seems to be the Greys that are the ones that are doing the abductions. It seems to be the Greys that are harvesting genetic from the sexual organs of their victims. The whole anal probe thing, it comes from them, right? It comes from them. So, but I didn't have any of those experiences. I did not feel like I was levitating. I did not wake up on a ship. I did not feel any telepathic communication in my head. It was strictly observation. All they did was look at me, and that was it. And I didn't even feel fear. But then again, that's not abnormal for me. But there was no even fear response. It wasn't even like, oh shit, what is this? It was like, I was trying, like, Tracy, you want to see this, although she probably didn't.
She's in the chat going, no, the hell I didn't either.
But no, I don't think it was trickster, because any interaction with a trickster archetype or the shadow archetype does not behave like that. That was very much a scientific observation. I witnessed something, And I can't really tell you what it means other than what I just explained that it was. So, no, there's something to it. There's something to it, and it's not spiritual. That was not a spiritual experience at all. I've had visions. I've had visions my whole life. I've talked about the angel and visions I've had and the communication I've had with supernatural beings in the woods. I've talked about this on this show. This was completely fundamentally different from that. This was like having an intruder in your home that just wanted to watch you. That's what it felt like. That's what it was. And then the only supernatural part of it was that when they left, they just disappeared back through the wall. It's like they walked back into the wall and vanished. So they came out of the wall and they went back into the wall. So that was the only weird part about it. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question, but I
don't know if it was the only weird thing about it. Them showing up is kind of weird.
Well, I mean, I guess that's weird, but
Yeah.
then again, like I said, there's people out there that have had gray experiences that were much worse than mine. I wasn't terribly bothered by this one. It just was, it was odd. All right. Calling in from, the Ohio area code of 330. Hello. You are on the air. 330. Hello.
Ohio. Maybe not.
Maybe not. I don't know.
Go Bucks.
Hello?
Hello.
Hey.
Yeah, there we are.
I keep hearing every other word.
Oh,
boy.
Okay. We're
Okay,
having
hang on.
that issue again.
We can hear you clearly, so do you want to answer
I wonder what's
your
going on
question
with
and then
this
we
thing.
can deal with it?
Go ahead, and if you can hear me, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, I'll ask my question, then I'll hang up and listen.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, going back to what you were saying, what your guest was saying about the chakras and higher vibrations and such, I read a book, and I wish I could remember the author, but he talked about meeting a group of monks, and they lived off the land. They all practiced their religion and their followings. They lived a pure and clean life, and they worked for a higher vibration. And they felt that they could actually see the plants vibrate and touch them. And then when they reached the highest point of vibration, that they would actually disappear into pure energy. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on that, and if you ever heard that story.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close that up so that you can listen on the normal, whatever platform you're listening on, which will probably be easier for you to hear. I apologize for, I don't know what's going on with the phones. We have to check that. We'll do a test on that at some point and find out why it's doing that.
It's happened the last 2 times.
I mean, I can't say I have heard that specific story, but I've heard stories that are like it.
Yeah.
And it does definitely follow a lot of patterns in Eastern philosophy, that the universe is made up of energy and that this energy can be interacted with, and that, ultimately that all physical phenomenon are energetic, basically just energetic phantoms or perceptions or projections, rather, of energy and geometry. That's pretty much it. These abstract concepts that come together in some sort of objective way, to be able to be comprehensible to our current state. I think that there is validity to this because that's how I viewed the world. Honestly, I'm the first one to say that the world is not what we have been taught to believe that it is. And I would say that the physical world is the one that's not real. It's the world of the mind. It's the world of thought. It's the world of the psyche, or if you want to get very Greek, the world of the soul. That's real. This is a phantom projection, a bastardized expression of what it really is. Now, that's not to say that physicality is not real. It's just how it's presented here and now in its current form, the realm of attachments and perceptions that are inaccurate and highly diluted by people's minds because we are egotists every single one of us. And we basically are a species that has adopted solipsism as a way of life. And so the universe responds to that. In fact, it's created our reality around that. So what we basically live is in this egocentric realm of conceptualization. It's all energy that's being projected out there and responding to our inputs, like a computer almost, but not a simulation. I'm not arguing that this is some kind of computer program by some advanced civilization that kind of put it together and that we're stuck in it. I'm not going to go that far, although there are some characteristics of it that seem to suggest that might be possible. But I think for the purposes of what you're asking, I would say that it falls more in line with how the yogis in India, these masters in Hinduism, understand the nature of reality. The Shangri-La, the legend of Shangri-La out in sort of the Himalayan, almost unreachable parts of the Himalayas, kind of somewhere out there beyond Tibet, it extends. It's a continuation of this notion that there's this energy that, a different realm, a different dimension that can be ascended to, but it's like here, but it's not visible unless you're at that level. Kind of like what our guest tonight was saying, that, we're three-dimensional and that there's other dimensions of reality. I don't know if I would phrase it the way she did, but I understand where she's coming from with that, because I do think there are realms of understanding, and that the farther, to put a Christian context on this, the further you fall from grace, the less connected you are to these higher concepts that we would equate to the celestial or angelic realm. So we become further.
My kingdom is not of this world.
Yes,
Jesus
there
said.
you go. Yeah, that's a perfect way to classify it. Father, anything you want to add to the question?
Look, I also had a kind of observation, and this isn't to target. I guess I really enjoyed her input, but I always have a caution about circular reasoning. The whole, if you don't come to this with an open mind, then you won't receive anything from it. It's kind of like an unverifiable, it's a statement that proves too much. So I'm always a bit cautious about that. If you're not, I never say that to people as a priest. I say these things are absolutely real. Sin, temptation, grace, forgiveness, the power of God. And like I said, I'm not having a go. I think the fact that somebody's talking to me in my church tells you that they're already open to some kind of conversation about that, right? Yeah. So I'm not denying the idea that somebody needs to be willing to engage, but I'm always a slightly kind of cautious about that. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about, Ruby, was, and in fairness to the guest, she wasn't addressing this question. I'm sure she's got her own answers. But the idea of these records and record keepers and having these multiple lives and all the rest of it, none of it points towards any sort of telos. What is the point of it all? Is that, I'm sure she's got answers, and I wish I could have asked her. But in other words, is there meaning in life that if it's just about having these repeated experiences and having them written down in a library? I don't see any telos in that. So, but you might know more about it than me.
The ascension, every life is supposed to be an ascension, I think, is what she was.
That seems to be
to what end?
To what end is the question? And see, this is why when we talked about negative near-death experiences with Kathy and Regan. This is why I asked them: do they think that these experiences that they are reporting, these hell experiences, these heaven experiences, could it be that it's exactly what the Tibetan Buddhists have been saying all this time, that these are just continuations of the illusion? So, past lives, how do we know that's not just the gati continuing on, the wheel of samsara continuing to spin? Because that's exactly what the Buddhists would say. This must be transcended, because you don't want to be stuck in this infinite state of reaching higher to some point, that doesn't really mean anything. To the Buddhists, so there is no meaning to samsara. It's completely pointless. That's why you want to transcend it. But attachments are what bring us here. And see, this is what I listen for. And again, I'm not discrediting anything the guest said. Okay, I'm not discrediting anything any of our guests said.
Neither am I, by the way. That's not my. That's
not the intention here. But I will say that I do become suspicious as a Buddhist, which I still consider myself to be one. In philosophically, not religiously, but philosophically, I still consider myself to be Buddhist. I get cautious, and it sort of puts up red flags, and I hear it all the time with all of the guests on our show, not just, that talk about these subjects, not just with the specific ones tonight or recently. When it satisfies a need, an attachment. And it always does. It's usually because someone's died and they don't want to lose that connection. She even refers to that. She can't let go of her parents. She's going to keep them here. And then we hear that with Regan a lot. The communication when they see dead relatives and the relatives are there. It's always a nurturing kind of thing. Well, I don't know about you, but in the experience of what the Jewish notion of Sheol is, that sounds like that would exactly be the kind of delusion an unconscious being stuck in the pits of the true hell would be experiencing. And how do we know that's not purgation? How do we know that having to overcome the wheel of samsara from the Buddhist perspective isn't exactly what purgatory is, which would mean, I'm going to blow your mind though, Father. I'm going to blow your mind, Father. How do we know that we're not in purgatory right now?
Oh, we don't.
And this might be purgatory.
Yeah, we talked about that over a few bourbons.
We have.
Scotches and cigars, and it was like, oh.
Yeah.
And we don't have any reason to think that it isn't, other than the fact that we know that there's some kind of cyclical process here, and there is always enough edge to keep you comfortable, but enough edge to make you uncomfortable so that you move forward.
I would say, though, to a certain extent, it's a false distinction. Because, it's actually the fulfillment of our lives is to reach the beatific vision of heaven, from the Christian perspective. Mm-hmm. And, purgation begins a millisecond after our baptism, right?
Yes.
So, that process of purification is a lifelong and beyond earthly life process.
Right.
Although, look, I actually do accept that it's possible for some people to perfect themselves so much in this life that they go straight to heaven. I do believe that. And actually, that should be our aim. But yeah, why on earth, I think what the Catholic Church have badly tried to write down in a code, because it's impossible to write into a code the things of eternity, is exactly this process of purgation that begins in this life, and if we don't fulfill it in this life, carries on. But yeah, for me, the idea that get levels and levels and levels, and they've got all these records. Like, what could be more of an attachment than these scrolls that contain all these lives that we've existed over and over again? It sounds like Sheol to me.
It does. And I think that when you read between the lines of the Tibetan Buddhist concepts of the Bardo, it's Sheol to a T. It's because it is a shadowy, Bardo is very shadowy. It's like you're aware, but you're not aware. So the majority of Tibetan Buddhism is teaching you how to be able to enter the Bardo awake. It's why one of the Buddhists saying is die with your eyes open. The worst death for a Buddhist is to die in your sleep, because you want to be able to project yourself. You want to have full grasp and awareness of the process, so that when the Bardo is truly entered, you're prepared for it. So that you can move beyond the attachments, because you're going to be inundated with attachments. There's the benevolent Buddhas that come and make you feel all happy, and then there's the wrathful Buddhas that come and eat you up. And And that's because there's ego reality there that has to be overcome. And you can't take it with you. That's the imperfection. So, when you look at
that reminds me. That reminds me of one of the kings of England. I think it might have been King George III, who's beloved in your nation. But I think he knew he was going to die, and he got out of bed, and the doctor's like, "You need to get in bed." He said, "No, a king dies on his feet." And it's the same kind of principle. I was going to say, because Timothy's asked a question, then who's praying for us to leave purgatory? I've got an answer to the question.
I do too, but let's hear yours first, then I'll give you mine.
No, I meant the answer to the question that you asked me about how do we know we're not in purgatory now?
Okay.
And I think it answers, well, this is my answer to Tim's question as well.
Okay.
There's only one way we know we're not in purgatory now.
What is that?
We can offer the Holy Mass.
Oh.
That's it. Because the liturgy, the fact that we can be present at, offer the Mass, be present at the Mass, receive communion, that's what tells us we're not in Sheol.
Okay.
Because we can't do that in Sheol. That's what people who are on this earth do for the souls in Sheol.
That is correct. But I'm gonna venture more of a, you want Twilight Zone. He says Twilight Zone music. I can make it even stranger if we want. Okay. We are dealing with concepts that are entirely nonlinear. Everything that we're dealing with about this tonight is nonlinear. Even in Akashic Records, it's nonlinear. Okay. But we are trying to understand it from a linear perspective. Okay. So we are always trying to think that, you're born, you live, and then you die. There's Sheol, then there's a resurrection of the dead, and then the righteous go off to heaven, and the wicked get forever in hell. However you want to define that. I mean, that's basically a linear thing about a non-linear reality. So it's like that doesn't really actually make sense from the actual point of view. It's just a way to conceptualize something that is beyond typical human comprehension. So I'm going to venture something here that's going to be very hard for people to grasp, but it could be that all realities are true. It could be that it isn't that you're doing this now and then you're going to do that later, that you're doing all of them now. And that's what's hard for us that's hard for us to grasp, because we want to see it as one thing when it's ultimately many things. So when you're in the Mass, you are alive and you're not in Sheol, and you are living a moment in time that has occurred for the purpose of the benefit of souls. But the rest of the time, your attachments, your traumas, your anxieties and depressions and fears that consume you throughout the rest of your life is the Sheol experience of that you're truly dead in that. And that both are true. So who's praying for us? Well, we are. But we're also there in time too, or outside of time rather. And then, so where's the communion of saints? Like, where's the church triumphant? Well, because that's out of time. Then, like I said before, if you're saved, you're already there. You just don't know it yet. You haven't caught up with it.
I think that is thoroughly mainstream Christian teaching. It's just poorly understood. That we are simultaneously here on earth, in purgatory, and in heaven.
Yes.
And the moment we're most aware of that is in the Mass, because the whole church, suffering, temporal and triumphant is unified in that. And now we say that as though, I'll just preach a sermon on that. But actually to really take on board what that means is beyond our minds. But the difference, and when that's why my primary question was, what's the telos of this? Mm-hmm. Of this, if we go down Akashic Records, whereas for the Christian and for the Jew and for the Muslim, actually, for that matter, there is a telos, because there's ultimately those things are true, that we're going to be inhabiting these eternal dimensions simultaneously, but there will be an end of time, and at that end of time, we'll then inhabit heaven perfectly with God, and so. In other words, this is why you don't need to be an intellectual, a spiritual guru to be saved in Christ, because it's a reality now that God has prepared for us, and that is, and in that fullness, in the end of time, when heaven is complete, is probably when we're all ready to inhabit that.
I think so.
To let go of the things that hold us here.
I think so. And like I said, I think we are the communion of saints. The church triumphant is we're there. Assuming we make it.
Yeah.
Assuming we make it.
We're both now and not yet.
Yeah.
Like
it is. That is good church theology. It actually uses that terminology, now but not yet. That's hard for people to grasp, but you have to understand all of this. Anything pertaining to God is always going to be from the outside of time perspective, and we're always going to be from the linear perspective that cannot wrap our heads around that. You have to accept the paradox of it.
We can only cope with a little glimpse of it, and we can only, we're then restricted by language, right? Language is a restriction.
Well, that's why Star Trek's so brilliant, because Star Trek at least helps you to understand, time paradoxes and stuff like that. It kind of gives you a way to rationalize it. At least it did for me. I'm not sure I truly understood this stuff until I watched Star Trek.
One of my favorite TNG episodes is the species that the Universal Translator, even though it translates what they're saying into English, they speak in mythic mythic stories. And so because their mythic stories are not known by anybody else, no one can communicate with them.
Oh, the Darmok at Jalad and Tanagra, that one, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Darmok.
That is so clever, that episode.
It is good.
It tells you that communication itself is impossible without a shared story.
Yes.
Like, wow, that is so deep.
It is. It really
so
is.
Deep.
Jamie, what's our next question? I don't want to ignore anybody. I could go off on this for
Marina
hours.
said it wasn't really a question, more of a muse, but I think it's worth talking about.
Okay.
She says, I just wonder, until you're past the point of no return in death, how much of an NDE is illusionary?
I think
Real, yes, but a reflection of what we want to see and or how we see ourselves.
I think it's all illusion. I do not think any of these NDEs are actual encounters with the actual kingdom of heaven. I think they are expressions of the heaven realms that are the Gati of Buddhism, but I think they are still illusions nonetheless. I do not think that is the real. And I think it's proven in the Christian theology, because why would there be a need for a new heaven and a new earth if the current one is sufficient? So I think what's being created here is reality. I think what God's actually saying is like, let me now make you real. Instead of like using terms like eternal life, but what does he mean by eternal life? What I think he's saying is, let me make you eternally real. Because we're like Pinocchio. We're like Pinocchio. We have the appearance of a real boy. We want to be real boys, but we are not. And so Geppetto has to make us, and he's kind of like the loving father. And it's kind of a crude example, but it is sort of an archetype that plays on this concept, this theme. And I think there's some truth there. I really do. So I'd say it's all illusion, because the real heaven, from our current linear point in time, from the perspective that we are at right now, outside of all the metaphysical, nonlinear assumptions we're making here tonight, I would say that the kingdom of heaven does not exist yet. The kingdom of heaven is being built by the church right now. We are laying the bricks for it. Jesus is the cornerstone, but it's not finished. It's not built. We can't walk into it yet. His kingdom's not here yet. That's why he says it's at hand, because it's being built through him.
It's at hand.
Yeah.
It's at hand.
It's not
he
something.
He tells us what it looks like.
Right.
Or no, he doesn't. He tells us what it's like.
Yes.
He gives us similes.
And he tells the good thief, today you'll be with me in paradise. He does not say you're going to be with me in the kingdom of heaven. He says you'll be with me in paradise, because I think that these different levels of the church have different roles to play within it. And I do think the church triumphant is building the church, is building the kingdom along with the church militant, and to a large extent also the church suffering in their own way, because the church suffering is purifying the church. They are the process of purification. It's the worst part, the worst job. I'd rather be the church militant any day. If I had a choice between the three, I'd take obviously church triumphant. But it's all the church. It's not the kingdom. There will be no need for the church in the kingdom of heaven.
inhabit every characteristic of Christ, just like he does ours.
Yes.
Us. And so that involves being born, maturing, being part of our faith community, and suffering and dying.
Yep.
And suffering and dying comes before the rising again, right? And so it's not suffering for no purpose. That would be hell.
That would be hell.
It's suffering for the purpose of being made holy. So he's a surgeon, not a murderer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Which is another reason not to fear judgment. Okay, let's. We got about 6 minutes. I could probably take one more question or two quick ones. Brandon, what do you got?
So this one comes from Danielle. It's 2 comments. She said, I feel that Akashic Records are a state of mind as well, which allows us to connect to an inner realm that we call Akashic Library. The Akashic Records essentially being like entry room in our minds where we might meet Akashic interfaces before going to the inner realm of Akashic Records to find the repository of all information.
I mean, that's a model that you can subscribe to help give it definition, to kind of give some clarity or comprehension
Wrap your
to
head
it.
around it, yeah.
I mean, I think any of these concepts that are going to always just be models, they're never going to be the actual truth. I don't think anybody could possibly relay the actual truth. You can only relay it through models, and I think some models are better than others, and that's why we have guests on this show, to come in and give us their model so that maybe we can learn something from it. Maybe we can't. Maybe the model sucks. I don't know. But that's for you to decide.
We learn something from that too. That's emphatic learning, right?
It is.
Actually, and it's not, to bring people on and go, you're stupid.
No.
And I don't think that at all. I mean, that's the most stupid mindset you can have, right?
Correct.
I've got nothing to learn from this person.
There's always something to learn.
Sometimes, and sometimes when someone presents something, you think, because a lot of the time, especially in ministry, you think, oh, the bloody church, it just drives you up the wall. But then sometimes you encounter something, you think, actually, no, you've just reminded me why I don't give up on it. Why the church is true, and why those teachings are vital, because otherwise you end up trapped in a really negative cycle with no point, with a meaningless life. And actually, so yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. And that, by the way, I'm not suggesting that's what today's present. I'm talking in the general.
Oh yeah, I understand. Yeah,
in the abstract. I thought she was really engaging. I was interested in what she had to say. So, but yeah, I think a mind open to learning will learn. Well, it's like at work, right? So when I was a rookie cop, I learned a lot from the terrible police officers.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. You learn more from them than you do your own.
I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, your own trainer.
I mean, it's what I do.
How not to do the job, yeah.
It's what we do here. It's what I've been doing with podcasting since since the technology first came out. People think I think I'm bullshitting them when I say this. I literally was one of the first podcasters ever. I had a very small show called Eye of the Seer on Blog Talk Radio, and what we did was basically I would just have different guests on. And back in those days, it was really easy because there was no shows to come on. And these were guests that they couldn't get on the big shows like Coast to Coast AM with like Art Bell. They had to, they had to do smaller stuff. And so when podcasting became available, the whole gamut of them came out of the woodwork, and you could have anybody you wanted on the show. And that's what Eye of the Seer was a show to talk about people's perspective in the paranormal. I didn't necessarily believe any of the things that they were saying. I just wanted to hear what people's models were so I could understand my own. And I learn about myself in context to how other people see themselves. And that's what I've been doing with these shows from the very beginning.
Well, the more models you study and the different beliefs and disciplines, you learn that we're not so far apart. We may have different terminology and some different
semantics.
Theology. It is semantics. But when it all comes down to is like the message for the last 2 weeks: love.
Yeah, isn't that what we're always saying?
Because there is only one God, and everyone's responding to Him.
They are responding,
just in their own way.
That's very good Catholic theology too. I mean, the Catechism literally explicitly says that all of these, when it talks about is there salvation outside the Catholic Church? You know, the church used to have a very harsh opinion on that, saying no.
Christ comes to you.
But now it's a little more enlightened in its approach to explaining this and saying that all religions are man reaching out to God in the best way they know how. And not all are perfect.
Karl Rahner was the theologian behind it.
Yeah.
If people want to look him up.
Good.
Rahner, Karl Rahner.
Thank you. Yeah, that's important to give that credit, because that's a brilliant way of approaching this. It is truly the truth. Not all of them are the same. They're not all created equal. And I'm not trying to say that, you know, it doesn't matter which religion you practice because they're all going to get you there. I'm not going to say that. I think they all can get you there. I'm not so sure they're all very good at it. And so there are some that are better than others. I've practiced the lion's share in my life, and look at what I settled on. I came back to the church 3 times out and leaving it twice. Okay, this is my third time. This is my third go at it. The third time was the charm. It stuck. Okay, but
before St. Paul talks about love in 1 Corinthians 13, he starts it by saying, "Now I'm going to show you a more perfect way."
There you go.
And that's how I see Christianity.
I do too.
You know, it's just a more perfect way.
Yep, it's a more efficient way. I mean, yes, technically they can all get you there. I do think so, but I don't think they're going to be
always
easy.
Christ that does it.
Yeah, it is always Christ. It might not come by that name because it becomes a semantics issue. But I mean, if you read between the lines, if you read between the lines of what our guest was saying tonight, you could definitely see that she wasn't saying anything that was terribly different than anything else I've ever said on this show. She had her own language for saying it, and she didn't like words like sin. Fair enough. I don't care for the word either, because I don't like connotations. I don't like preconceived notions, and sometimes that gets in the way to understanding. So I get that. That's why I always try to qualify these theological terms.
It's got too much semantic load now. The word sin.
It does.
Yeah.
It means guilt now. It's like guilt. It's like it's an excuse to feel bad about yourself, and when it's an opportunity to be like, no, it's an opportunity to now become better. You know, look at it the right way. All right, well, that's the end of the show, and don't worry, because next week it's open lines, open topics, and we can continue this for all you want for 3 hours, okay? We can just like dive in and just answer whatever questions are on your mind. We're going to check to see what's going on with the phone lines, because this is the second time Michael called in. She couldn't hear. It was like spotty, and then the last caller said the same thing, so there's something weird now. I don't know what it is. There's nothing on our end, because we can always hear them clearly. But you know, we'll check it out. Great show tonight. Thank you to Father Chris and Brandon for being with us tonight, and for your time, because you know, I know, Father, you're busy. You know, Brandon, I know you've got 2 jobs now, so you know, we really appreciate that you spend time with us.
Absolutely.
And Jamie, thank you for coming all the way out here, because it's like a 2-hour drive for you.
Not quite that long.
Well,
hey,
it can be though.
It's always worth it.
Yeah, it is worth it. All right, so next week, open lines, open topics, spending it with you. You are the guest. You just call into the show or ask your questions, and we'll do our best to accommodate by answering them. We also want to hear your stories, so start thinking now what you want to talk about, and we'll dive in next week. Okay. Till then, I'll see you out there in the ether. God bless everyone.
Good night, everybody.